You have been carrying the same hurt in your mind longer than you admit. They told you time heals everything. But if that were true, why does one memory still return when the room becomes quiet? Why does one sentence still echo like it was spoken yesterday? Why does your heart keep going back to the same moment, trying to understand what broke it? The truth is, your mind is not replaying the pain because it enjoys suffering. It is replaying it because a part of you still believes that if you can finally understand why it happened, then maybe you will finally feel free. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that inner suffering does not continue only because of what happened. It continues because the mind keeps touching the wound, asking it to explain itself again and again. The past becomes heavy when you keep entering it as if there is still something there that can save you. But peace does not come from winning an old argument. Peace does not come from hearing the apology you never received. Peace does not come from forcing the memory to make sense. Peace begins when you stop feeding the thoughts that keep the pain alive. Tonight, as you listen to this, your mind will begin to slow down. The same hurt may rise, but you will start seeing it differently, not as a place to live, not as a truth about who you are, but as a passing shadow that no longer needs your whole life. Your breath will soften, your heart will loosen its grip, and little by little you will learn how to watch the memory without becoming trapped inside it. This is not just a lesson about why you keep replaying the same hurt in your mind. This is Buddhist wisdom for the inner suffering you are finally ready to release. Are you ready? Let us begin. And now that you have seen that peace does not come from forcing the past to explain itself, we have to go deeper into the first trap of the hurting mind. Because before a memory becomes a prison, it usually begins as a question. Before pain becomes a loop, it often begins as a search for meaning. You are not just replaying what happened because it hurt you. You are replaying it because some quiet part of you still whispers, "If I can finally understand it, maybe I can finally be free." There is a kind of pain that does not shout. It sits quietly in the mind and waits for silence. It waits until the phone is down, the room is still, the day is over, and suddenly the old scene returns. The words come back. The look on their face comes back. The way you felt small, confused, rejected, betrayed, or unseen comes back. And before you know it, you are no longer lying in your bed, sitting in your room, or walking through your day. You are back inside that moment, trying to solve what already happened. This is one of the deepest reasons the mind replays pain. It believes understanding will bring peace. It believes that if it can find the missing piece, the whole wound will finally close. It says, maybe I missed something. Maybe there was a reason. Maybe if I look at it one more time, I will find the answer that stops the ache. But the painful truth is this. Not every wound becomes lighter because you understand it. Some wounds become heavier because you keep asking them to explain themselves. The mind is a great problem solver. If the door is locked, it looks for a key. If a road is blocked, it searches for another way. If someone says something confusing, the mind tries to decode it. This is useful when life gives you clear problems. But emotional pain is not always a puzzle. Sometimes it is simply an experience that hurt. Sometimes someone acted from their own confusion, their own fear, their own selfishness, their own weakness, or their own lack of awareness. And because their action did not make sense to your heart, your mind keeps returning to it, hoping it can turn pain into logic. But human behavior is not always logical. People can hurt you without having a clean explanation. People can leave without giving you a proper ending. People can say they care and still act carelessly. People can promise safety and become the source of your anxiety. People can know your wound and still touch it. And when this happens, the mind struggles because it wants a neat answer. It wants something it can hold. It wants to say, this happened because of this. But life does not always give the heart a complete sentence. This is where inner suffering begins to grow. The first pain was what happened. The second pain is the mind returning to it again and again, believing it can finally make it hurt less. Buddhism teaches that suffering often grows not only from the event itself, but from our attachment to it. Not attachment because we love the pain, but attachment because we still believe the pain has something to give us. We keep going back as if the memory is a teacher, but sometimes the memory has already taught all it can teach. After that, it only repeats the same lesson in a harsher voice. Think about how many times you have asked yourself, why did they do that? At first, the question feels innocent. It feels like healing. It feels like wisdom. But after a while, the question becomes a chain. You ask it while eating. You ask it while trying to sleep. You ask it when someone mentions their name. You ask it when a song, a place, a smell, or a sentence pulls you back. And the more you ask, the more your mind believes the answer is still missing. It does not realize that the repeated asking is now keeping the wound open. There is a difference between seeking clarity and feeding suffering. Clarity has a quiet ending. Feeding suffering has no ending. Clarity says, I see what happened, I see what it did to me, I see what I must learn. But suffering says, look again. Maybe there is more. Maybe you were wrong. Maybe there is another hidden reason. Clarity brings you back to the present. Suffering drags you back into the same room, the same sentence, the same silence, the same ache. And the hardest part is that the mind can make this loop feel responsible. It tells you, I am just trying to understand. It tells you, I am just trying to heal. It tells you, I need closure. But sometimes what we call closure is really the hope that the past will become gentle if we stare at it long enough. Sometimes what we call understanding is the desire to make someone's hurtful action feel less painful. We want a reason because a reason feels safer than emptiness. A reason gives the heart something to hold, but not every reason gives peace. You may understand that someone was emotionally immature and still feel hurt. You may understand that someone was selfish and still feel wounded. You may understand that someone had their own pain and still feel damaged by what they did. Understanding can explain the behavior, but it does not always erase the impact. This is why some people become exhausted after years of thinking. They know the facts, they know the patterns, they know the childhood wounds, the red flags, the excuses, the timing, the weakness, the fear, and the emotional history, yet they still do not feel free. Why? Because the heart does not heal only by collecting explanations. The heart heals when it stops asking the explanation to replace acceptance. Buddhist wisdom points us toward a deeper truth. The mind wants to understand so it can control. The heart needs to accept so it can release. These are not the same thing. Control says, if I understand why, I can stop feeling powerless. Acceptance says, even if I never fully understand why, I can stop giving this moment my whole life. Control keeps searching the past. Acceptance returns to the breath. Control argues with what happened. Acceptance sees what happened and slowly stops fighting the fact that it happened. This does not mean you approve of the hurt. This does not mean you pretend it was fine. This does not mean you excuse the person. Buddhism is not asking you to smile at your wound and call it beautiful. It is asking you to see clearly. Seeing clearly means you stop confusing repeated thought with true healing. You stop believing that pain becomes meaningful only when every detail is understood. You stop treating your mind like a courtroom where the past must be judged every night before you can rest. Many people replay hurt because they are still waiting for the past to confess. They want the memory to finally say, yes, you were hurt. Yes, it was unfair. Yes, you did not deserve that. But the memory cannot give you the comfort you needed from the person who failed you. It can only replay what happened. That is all a memory can do. It cannot become kinder. It cannot change its tone. It cannot hold you. It cannot apologize. It cannot become the ending you deserved. When you keep returning to it for comfort, you are asking a dry well for water. And yet, the mind returns because it is trying to protect you. This is important. You are not foolish for replaying pain. You are not weak. You are not broken. The mind replays emotional injury because it wants to prevent it from happening again. It says, "Let us study this. Let us watch every detail. Let us find where the danger began." In its own way, the mind is trying to build a shield. It wants to recognize the next betrayal before it arrives. It wants to hear the next lie before it sounds convincing. It wants to notice the next abandonment before your heart gets too close. But protection can become a prison when the mind never stops studying the wound. A person who was once hurt by fire may become careful around flames. That is wisdom. But if that person spends every night staring at the memory of the burn, feeling the heat again, smelling the smoke again, fearing every small light, then caution has become suffering. In the same way, your mind may have learned something important from the hurt. It may have learned to notice inconsistency, to listen to your body, to respect your intuition, to stop ignoring small signs, to stop begging for love from people who cannot give it. Those lessons are valuable. But once the lesson has been received, you do not have to keep sitting in the classroom of pain. The mind often believes peace will come when the story finally makes sense. But some stories do not make sense because they were created by unconscious people. Some people do not understand themselves enough to explain what they did to you. Some people caused pain from a place they have never examined. If you keep searching for a clean reason inside a messy person's behavior, you may spend years looking for something that was never there. You may be waiting for depth from someone who acted from shallowness. You may be waiting for maturity from someone who was ruled by impulse. You may be waiting for truth from someone who survived by avoiding it. This is why Buddhist wisdom teaches us to return to direct experience. What happened? What did it create inside you? What are you still holding? What can you release now? These questions are different from "Why did they do this?" They bring your attention back to your own freedom. They move you from their mind to your heart. They stop making your peace depend on someone else's hidden motives. When the mind keeps replaying pain, it often thinks the answer is outside you. It thinks peace is hidden in their reason, their apology, their regret, their explanation, their message, their confession, their changed behavior. But if your peace depends on something another person may never give, then your life becomes tied to their absence. You wait, you check, you wonder, you interpret, you remember, you suffer. And all the while, the present moment sits quietly beside you, untouched, waiting for you to return. There is a painful honesty here. Sometimes we keep replaying hurt because we are not ready to accept how simple the truth might be. Maybe they did not value you the way you valued them. Maybe they were not capable of loving with care. Maybe they enjoyed being needed but feared being responsible. Maybe they liked your warmth but did not know how to protect it. Maybe they were careless because they did not have the depth you hoped they had. These truths hurt because they do not give us the dramatic explanation the mind wants. They are too plain, too sharp, too final. The mind would rather search for a complicated reason than accept a simple wound, because a complicated reason gives hope. It says, maybe there is more to the story. Maybe they cared but were afraid. Maybe they hurt me because they were confused. Maybe if I understand them better, I will stop hurting. But sometimes the simple truth is the door to freedom, not because it feels good, but because it stops the endless search. It allows you to say, this hurt me. I learned from it. I do not need to live inside it anymore. Buddhism speaks often about craving. Most people think craving is only about wanting pleasure, comfort, money, food, praise, or attention. But there is also a craving for explanation, a craving for emotional certainty, a craving to make the past clear enough that it no longer scares us. This craving can become very subtle. You may not be craving the person anymore. You may not want them back. You may not even like them now. But you may still crave the explanation. You may still crave the final sentence that makes your nervous system relax. You may still crave the moment where everything clicks and the pain says, "Now I can leave." But peace does not always arrive as a click. Sometimes peace arrives as a decision repeated gently over time. I do not need to solve this tonight. I do not need to enter this memory again. I can feel the sadness without becoming the sadness. I can let this question pass without following it. This is not weakness. This is discipline. This is the quiet strength of a person who has stopped letting old pain choose the direction of their attention. The mind is powerful, but attention is the gatekeeper. Whatever you return to again and again becomes stronger in your inner world. If you return to resentment, resentment grows roots. If you return to shame, shame builds a house. If you return to the question, why was I not enough? That question begins to shape your identity. But if you return to the breath, to the body, to the present, to compassion, to truth, something else begins to grow. Not instantly, not magically, but steadily. This is why the practice is not to force the memory away. Forcing it away often gives it more power. The practice is to see it when it comes, name it gently, and refuse to enter the old courtroom. You can say within yourself, this is the mind searching for peace in the past. That simple recognition creates space. You are no longer the thought. You are the one seeing the thought. You are no longer drowning inside the memory. You are watching the wave rise and fall. There is great freedom in realizing that every thought does not deserve a conversation. Some thoughts are only echoes. Some memories are only old weather passing through the mind. Some questions are not doors. They are traps dressed like doors. You do not have to answer every pain that knocks. You do not have to follow every memory down the hallway. You do not have to prove that what happened mattered by thinking about it until you are empty. This is one of the hidden wounds behind replaying pain. Many people are afraid that if they stop thinking about what happened, it means they are saying it was not important. They fear that letting go means the person got away with it. They fear that peace means betrayal of their own suffering, so they keep remembering, they keep rehearsing, they keep the hurt alive as evidence, evidence that it mattered, evidence that it was wrong, evidence that they were deeply affected. But your pain does not need to stay loud to be valid. Your wound does not need to bleed forever to prove it was real. You can honor what happened without living inside it. You can admit that it changed you without letting it own you. You can say, "That hurt me," without making the hurt your home. This is the middle path, not denial, not obsession, not pretending you are fine, not drowning in the past, just honest seeing. Gentle release, a return to yourself. The mind replays pain because it believes the past still holds the key, but often the key is not in the past. The key is in your relationship with the past. It is in the moment you stop asking the memory to become kinder. It is in the moment you stop demanding that the person who hurt you become wise enough to explain your suffering. It is in the moment you realize that understanding them is not the same as freeing yourself. Some people spend years understanding those who hurt them while never learning how to care for the version of themselves who was hurt. They analyze the other person's childhood, fears, patterns, trauma, weaknesses, and emotional limits. They become experts in the person who caused the pain. But they remain strangers to the part of themselves that is still trembling inside. Buddhist wisdom would gently ask, can you bring the attention back home? Not to punish, not to blame, but to heal. Instead of asking, why did they do this to me? You might begin asking, what did this awaken in me? Instead of asking, how could they not see my worth? You might ask, where did I forget to protect my own worth? Instead of asking, will they ever understand how much they hurt me? You might ask, can I understand my own pain deeply enough to stop abandoning myself? These questions do not trap you in the past. They guide you back into your own hands. This is where peace begins to change shape. At first, peace may look like getting the answer. Then, as wisdom grows, peace starts to look like needing the answer less. Then one day, peace becomes something even quieter. It becomes the ability to remember without collapsing, to hear the name without shaking inside, to pass the place without losing your breath, to think of what happened and feel sadness, but not be swallowed by it. That is real freedom, not forgetting, not pretending, but no longer being controlled. The mind may still offer you the old question. It may say, but why? And with practice, you can answer softly, I may never know fully, and I can still be free. This sentence can feel strange at first because the mind hates unfinished things. It wants every story closed. It wants every wound explained. It wants every person to confess. But the soul can mature beyond the mind's demand for perfect closure. The soul can learn to rest even when the story remains incomplete. This is not easy. Nobody who has been deeply hurt should be told to simply let go as if pain is a coat you can remove in one movement. Letting go is often slow. It happens in small moments. One night you choose not to replay the conversation. One morning you choose not to check for signs. One afternoon you notice the memory and breathe instead of following it. One day you realize you have not thought about it for hours, then for a day, then maybe longer. And when it returns, you do not judge yourself. You just return again. That returning is the practice. That returning is the path. In Buddhism, the mind is often compared to something restless, moving from branch to branch, thought to thought, fear to fear, memory to memory. The goal is not to hate the mind. The goal is to train it with compassion. When it runs back to pain, you do not attack it. You do not say, why am I like this? You say, I see you are trying to protect me, but we do not need to go there right now. This is how inner suffering begins to soften, not through violence against the mind, but through patient guidance. The part of you that replays pain is often the part that still wants safety. It wants to make sure you never feel that helpless again. So give it safety in the present. Place a hand on your chest. Breathe slowly. Feel the ground. Look around the room. Remind yourself, that moment is not happening now. This sounds simple, but it is powerful. Pain pulls you into the past. The body brings you back to now. And now is where healing can actually happen. You cannot heal in the moment that already passed. You can only heal in the moment you are in. This is why replaying pain becomes so exhausting. It spends your present energy on a past event. It asks today's heart to keep paying yesterday's debt. It makes you miss the life that is still here, the cup beside you, the air entering your lungs, the person who loves you now, the small chance to begin again, the quiet space where peace is still possible. There is a tenderness in realizing that the mind only wanted peace, but chose the wrong road. It thought understanding would be the door. Sometimes it is. Sometimes understanding helps you see the lesson, the pattern, the truth. But after understanding has done its work, continuing to replay the pain is no longer wisdom. It becomes another form of attachment. It becomes the mind circling the ashes, hoping to find the house still standing. At some point, you must ask yourself, is this thought bringing me closer to freedom, or is it keeping me loyal to suffering? This question is not harsh, it is honest. Some thoughts feel important because they are familiar. Some memories feel meaningful because they are intense. But intensity is not always truth. Familiarity is not always safety. And repetition is not always healing. The hurt may have happened once, but the mind can repeat it 1,000 times. Each replay can feel like another wound, another betrayal, another fall, but the moment you become aware, the pattern begins to weaken. Awareness is the first light in the room. It does not remove everything at once, but it shows you where you are. It helps you notice, I am not solving this. I am suffering through it again. That noticing is sacred. That noticing is where Buddhist wisdom begins. You do not have to shame yourself for the nights you replayed it. You were trying to survive. You were trying to understand. You were trying to collect the pieces of yourself from a moment that scattered you. But now a deeper kind of healing is asking to begin. A healing that does not depend on getting every answer. A healing that does not wait for the past to become fair. A healing that does not require the person who hurt you to become awake before you allow yourself peace. Let the mind ask its question, but do not let the question become your cage. Let the memory appear, but do not mistake its appearance for a command. Let the pain be seen, but do not feed it with your whole attention. You can bow to what happened and still walk away. You can learn from the hurt and still leave the classroom. You can carry wisdom forward without carrying the wound as your identity. And maybe this is the quiet truth your heart has been waiting for. You do not need to understand every detail to begin healing. You do not need the perfect explanation to breathe again. You do not need the past to become gentle before you become free. Sometimes peace begins the moment you stop asking pain to give you permission to live. So, when the same hurt returns tonight, do not panic. Do not fight it like an enemy. Do not follow it like a master. Just see it. Breathe. Say quietly, this is the old search for understanding. This is the mind looking for peace in a place where peace no longer lives. Then come back. Come back to your breath. Come back to your body. Come back to this moment. Come back to the part of you that is still here, still alive, still able to soften, because the mind may replay pain believing understanding will bring peace. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that peace begins when you stop needing the past to explain itself before you allow your heart to rest. And the more you practice this, the more you will see that the answer was never hidden inside the hurt. The answer was in learning how to stop returning to it as if it were home. And once you begin to see that the mind keeps replaying pain because it is searching for peace in the past, another deeper truth starts to appear. Sometimes the mind is not only looking for answers, sometimes it is holding on because the pain has become familiar. The hurt may be heavy, but at least it is known. The ache may be tiring, but at least it gives the heart something to hold. And this is where inner suffering becomes quiet and dangerous, because old pain can begin to feel safer than the empty space that appears when you finally let it go. There is a strange comfort in the hurt you already know. It may sound painful to admit, but many people stay close to old wounds because those wounds have become part of their inner routine. The memory returns, the chest tightens, the question rises, the heart sinks, and somehow, even though it hurts, the mind knows what to expect. But what happens when the memory stops? What happens when the pain no longer fills the room? What happens when there is no one to blame, no story to replay, no old conversation to rehearse, no wound to keep touching? For many hearts, that silence feels terrifying. This is the hidden attachment to old hurt. It is not that you love the pain. It is not that you want to suffer. It is not that you enjoy remembering what broke you. It is that the pain has been with you so long that the thought of living without it feels like stepping into an unknown world. Your mind may say it wants peace, but another part of you may quietly ask, who will I be without this story? What will I feel when this ache is gone? What will be left of me when I stop carrying what happened? This is why some people can say, I want to let go, but still return to the same memory every night. They truly want freedom, but they also fear the emptiness that freedom may reveal. Because sometimes pain gives structure to a life that feels uncertain. Pain gives the mind a subject. Pain gives the heart a reason for its heaviness. Pain gives a person an explanation for why they are guarded, distant, angry, tired, or afraid. When that pain is removed, the person may have to face something even deeper, the quiet space beneath the wound. Buddhist wisdom teaches that attachment is not always attachment to pleasure. Sometimes we become attached to suffering because suffering becomes familiar. The mind clings not only to what feels good, but also to what feels known. This is why people return to painful patterns, painful memories, painful relationships, painful thoughts, and painful identities. The mind does not always choose what is healthy. Often, it chooses what it recognizes. And when old hurt has lived inside you for a long time, peace can feel unfamiliar, even suspicious. You may have noticed this in your own life. A calm day arrives, and instead of resting in it, your mind searches for something wrong. Someone treats you kindly, and you wonder when they will change. A quiet moment comes, and your thoughts bring back an old wound. Not because the wound belongs in that moment, but because your nervous system has learned to expect heaviness. It has learned that emotional intensity means something is happening. So when life becomes still, the mind becomes restless. It asks, why is it so quiet? Where is the pain? Where is the problem? And then it reaches for the old hurt, not because the hurt is good, but because the hurt is familiar. This is one reason emotional emptiness can feel so threatening. When you let go of a painful memory, you may expect immediate peace. But sometimes the first thing you feel is not peace. Sometimes the first thing you feel is space. And space can feel uncomfortable when you are used to emotional noise. Space can feel like loneliness. Space can feel like loss. Space can feel like you are standing in a room after everyone has left. And suddenly you do not know what to do with your hands, your thoughts, or your heart. Old hurt can become emotional furniture. You may not like it, but you have arranged your inner life around it. You know where it sits. You know how it feels. You know what thoughts come with it. You know what mood follows it. You know what story it tells about you. But when healing begins, that furniture is moved. The room becomes open, and even though the space is healthier, it can feel strange. The heart asks, what do I do with all this room? This is why healing requires courage. Not only the courage to face pain, but the courage to face the emptiness after pain loosens its grip. Many people think the hardest part is remembering what happened. But sometimes the harder part is no longer needing to remember it. Because if the hurt has been your companion for years, its absence can feel like abandonment. You may even miss the pain, not because it was kind to you, but because it was always there. There are people who wake up and reach for their old hurt the way others reach for their phone. Before the day begins, the mind checks the wound. It asks, are we still sad? Are we still angry? Are we still waiting? Are we still proving that what happened mattered? This checking becomes a habit, and like all habits, it creates a false sense of safety. The mind believes that as long as it keeps the hurt nearby, it will not be caught off guard again. It believes that letting go means becoming careless. It believes that peace may make you vulnerable. But true peace does not make you careless, it makes you clear. Letting go does not mean you forget the lesson. It means you stop living inside the injury. You can remember the fire without keeping your hand in the flame. You can honor the warning without carrying the burn as your identity. You can learn from pain without becoming loyal to pain. This is where Buddhist wisdom becomes deeply practical. It asks you to look at your attachment without shame, not to judge yourself, not to accuse yourself, not to say, why am I still holding on, but to gently ask, what does this pain give me that I am afraid to live without? That question can open a hidden door, because sometimes old hurt gives a person a sense of control. Sometimes it gives them a reason not to trust again. Sometimes it gives them permission to stay closed. Sometimes it gives them an identity that feels safer than becoming new. If you have been hurt deeply, openness may feel dangerous, joy may feel temporary, love may feel like a trap, rest may feel undeserved. So the mind clings to pain because pain says, stay alert, stay guarded, stay ready. And for a while that may have helped you survive. But survival is not the same as freedom. A locked door can protect you from danger, but it can also keep you away from sunlight. A guarded heart may avoid some wounds, but it may also miss tenderness, friendship, love, laughter, and the simple ease of being alive. The attachment to old hurt often hides behind strong statements. I am just being realistic. I know how people are. I will never let anyone close again. I am better alone. I do not need anyone. Sometimes these words come from wisdom, but sometimes they come from a wound that has learned how to sound powerful. The heart may be saying, I am safe now, when underneath it is really saying, I am afraid to feel empty if I stop holding this pain. There is a difference between peace and emotional numbness. Some people think they have let go because they no longer cry. But they have not found peace. They have simply frozen the wound. Others think they are strong because they never speak about what happened. But silence is not always freedom. Sometimes silence is just pain that has stopped asking for help. Real healing is not becoming hard. Real healing is becoming soft without becoming blind. It is learning to open your hand without forgetting what once cut it. Old hurt feels safer than emptiness because emptiness asks you to meet yourself without the story, and that can feel frightening. When you no longer define yourself by who left, who betrayed you, who disappointed you, who ignored you, or who failed to love you properly, you may have to ask, who am I now? This question is not small. It can shake a person, because pain, when repeated long enough, becomes part of the way you introduce yourself to yourself. You may not say it out loud, but inside the story may sound like, I am the one who was abandoned. I am the one who was not chosen. I am the one who gave too much. I am the one who was never understood. I am the one who was treated unfairly. And while these things may describe what happened, they are not the whole truth of who you are. But the mind can become attached to them because they create a clear shape. They explain your fear. They explain your sadness. They explain your distance. They explain your anger. Without them, the inner world may feel less certain. This is why the Buddha's teaching on non-attachment is not cold or empty. It is actually compassionate. It does not say nothing matters. It says, do not build your whole self around what changes, what passes, what wounds, what leaves, what disappoints. Because whatever you attach to as identity becomes a cage. If you attach to success, failure terrifies you. If you attach to approval, rejection controls you. If you attach to old hurt, peace feels like losing yourself. Letting go of attachment to pain does not mean denying your past. It means refusing to let the past be the center of your inner world forever. It means saying, yes, this happened. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it shaped me. But no, it will not be the only thing that defines me. This is not easy. The ego often prefers a painful identity over a spacious unknown, because identity feels stable even when it is built from suffering. You may see this when someone keeps telling the same painful story again and again, not because they are still processing it, but because the story has become their proof of who they are. They know where to pause. They know where to feel angry. They know where to feel wronged. They know what response they want from others. For a moment, the story gives them attention, sympathy, meaning, and emotional weight. But after the telling ends, they are still alone with the same wound. The story has been repeated, but the heart has not been released. There is nothing wrong with sharing pain. In fact, telling the truth can be part of healing. But there comes a point where repeating the wound no longer frees you. It only strengthens the attachment. The question becomes, Am I speaking this to release it, or am I speaking this to keep it alive? That question must be asked gently, because shame has no place in healing. You are not wrong for needing to be heard. Every wounded heart wants a witness, but the deepest witness must eventually come from within. You must become the one who can sit with your own heart and say, "I believe you. I see what happened. You do not have to keep proving it." So much replaying comes from the need to prove pain. If no one understood you, you keep explaining it inside. If no one apologized, you keep building the case. If no one came back, you keep holding the evidence. But your suffering does not become more real because you repeat it. It was real the first time. Your pain does not need endless rehearsal to be valid. The wound does not need to stay open to prove that the cut was deep. Emotional emptiness also frightens people because it removes distraction. As long as you are focused on the old hurt, you do not have to feel the full silence of your present life. You do not have to face the dreams you postponed. You do not have to ask why you feel disconnected from yourself. You do not have to admit that certain parts of your life need attention. You do not have to sit with loneliness, uncertainty, or the quiet question of what you truly want now. Old pain can become a curtain. It covers the window. It blocks the view. It keeps you from seeing what is asking to be changed. This is why the mind may return to the wound at the exact moment you are close to growth. You may be ready to begin something new, and suddenly the past becomes loud. You may meet someone kind, and suddenly the old betrayal rises. You may feel a little joy, and suddenly guilt appears. You may have a quiet evening, and suddenly the memory demands attention. The old hurt says, "Do not move too far. Do not become too free. Do not forget me." But the deeper self says, "You can remember without returning. You can grow without betraying what you survived." The attachment to hurt can also feel like loyalty. Some people feel that if they heal, they are abandoning the version of themselves who suffered. They think, "If I become happy, what happens to the part of me that cried alone? If I move on, does that mean their pain no longer matters?" This is a tender and powerful fear. But healing is not abandonment. Healing is the way you rescue that younger, wounded, or broken part of yourself. You do not honor your past self by staying in pain forever. You honor that self by finally carrying them out of the place where they were left. Buddhist compassion teaches us to meet pain with kindness, not ownership. You can place your hand over your heart and say, "This hurt lived here, but it is not all that lives here." You can say, "This memory shaped me, but it is not my master." You can say, "I am allowed to become someone my pain never expected me to become." These are not just beautiful words. They are a new inner direction. There is also a hidden fear that without pain, life will feel meaningless. This happens when suffering has been the main source of emotional intensity. Some people have known more chaos than calm, more longing than love, more anxiety than safety. So when peace arrives, it feels flat. It feels boring. It feels like nothing is happening. But peace is not empty. Peace is quiet because it does not need to fight for your attention. It does not scream like pain. It does not pull like obsession. It does not burn like anger. Peace is soft. And because it is soft, a mind trained by suffering may not recognize it at first. You may mistake peace for emptiness because you are used to pain feeling important. But peace has its own fullness. It is the fullness of breathing without waiting for disaster. It is the fullness of walking through a day without carrying an old argument in your chest. It is the fullness of hearing silence and not needing to fill it with memories. It is the fullness of being with yourself without needing a wound to explain your existence. To reach that fullness, you must pass through the uncomfortable space where the old hurt begins to loosen, but the new self has not fully formed. This is the in-between place. It can feel lonely. It can feel strange. You may feel tempted to return to the pain just to feel something familiar. But this is where practice matters. You breathe, you stay. You do not run back into the old fire just because the open air feels cold. This is the moment to ask, what can I build in the space pain used to occupy? Because letting go is not only removal, it is also creation. If old hurt took your attention, what will you now give your attention to? If old pain shaped your identity, what values will shape you now? If the wound taught you fear, what will teach you trust? If the memory filled your nights, what will you place gently into your evenings instead? Healing needs direction. Empty space becomes peaceful when it is filled with presence, purpose, care, and truth. You might begin very small, a quiet walk without rehearsing the past, a cup of tea without checking the old wound, a page of writing that does not mention them, a prayer that does not ask why, a breath that simply says, I am here. These small moments retrain the heart. They teach the mind that safety does not have to come from pain. Safety can come from presence. Safety can come from your own steadiness. Safety can come from knowing that you can meet life without dragging every old wound into the room. The attachment to old hurt weakens when you stop treating pain as proof. You do not need pain to prove you loved deeply. You do not need pain to prove you were betrayed. You do not need pain to prove you were loyal, sincere, patient, or kind. You do not need pain to prove the past mattered. The fact that it happened is enough. The fact that it shaped you is enough. The fact that your heart remembers is enough. You are allowed to heal without presenting evidence. This is where Buddhist wisdom gently turns you toward impermanence. Everything changes, even pain, but attachment tries to make pain permanent. It says, this is who I am now, this is how I will always feel. This is what life has made me. Impermanence says, this too is moving, this too is changing, this too can soften. Even the hurt you think will live forever shifts when you stop feeding it with identity. The memory may remain, but the grip changes. The story may remain, but the suffering around it becomes lighter. You are not required to throw your pain away. That is not the path. The path is to hold it differently. At first, pain may feel like a chain around your neck. Later, it may become a scar you can touch without breaking. Later still, it may become wisdom. But it cannot become wisdom while you keep using it as a shelter from emptiness. Wisdom begins when you can say, this hurt taught me something, but it is not my home. And maybe the emptiness you fear is not really emptiness. Maybe it is space. Maybe it is the first open field your heart has seen in years. Maybe it feels frightening because there are no walls, no old voices, no familiar ache, no repeated story telling you where to stand. But space is not punishment. Space is possibility. It is where a new life can begin without asking permission from the old wound. You may not know who you are without the pain yet. That is okay. You do not have to know immediately. Healing is not a race toward a new identity. It is a slow return to the life beneath the injury. Before the hurt, there was a part of you that could feel wonder, a part that could laugh without guilt, a part that could rest without suspicion, a part that could trust a moment without searching for the hidden danger. That part may not be gone. It may only be buried beneath years of emotional guarding. When old hurt feels safer than emptiness, the practice is not to force yourself to release everything at once. The practice is to create enough inner safety that letting go no longer feels like falling. You do this by becoming a steady presence for yourself. You do this by honoring your feelings without letting them rule your whole life. You do this by giving your mind something kinder to return to. You do this by building a present that feels more nourishing than the past feels familiar. The mind will test you. It will bring the memory back and ask, are we still holding this? It will offer the old sadness and say, this is who we are. It will bring the old anger and say, this keeps us strong. It will bring the old story and say, without this, we are nothing. But you can answer with gentleness. No, This was part of my life, but it is not the whole of me. I can let space open. I can survive the quiet. I can meet myself without the wound. This is a sacred turning point. The moment you stop using pain to avoid emptiness, you begin to discover that emptiness was never the enemy. It was simply the place inside you that had not yet been filled with your own presence. The old hurt occupied that place for a long time, so when it leaves, the room feels bare. But now you can enter that room with compassion. You can bring breath there. You can bring patience there. You can bring new choices there. You can bring life there. And as you continue, you may notice something soft but powerful. The memory loses its authority. It may still visit, but it no longer owns the house. The sadness may still rise, but it no longer decides your future. The emptiness may still appear, but you no longer rush to fill it with suffering. You begin to understand that peace is not the absence of all pain. Peace is the end of being controlled by pain. This is why old hurt can feel safer than emotional emptiness, and this is why release must be gentle. You are not only letting go of a memory, you are letting go of a familiar inner world. You are learning to live without the ache that once explained you. You are learning to trust quietness. You are learning to stand in open space without running back to the wound. You are learning that the unknown can hold you more kindly than the past ever did. So, if the old hurt calls you back, pause before you answer. Ask yourself, am I returning because there is wisdom here, or because this pain feels familiar? Ask, am I afraid of what I will feel if I finally stop carrying this? Ask, what would my life look like if I no longer needed this wound to explain my heart? These questions do not force healing. They invite it. They open a door without pushing you through. And little by little, the attachment begins to loosen. Not because you hated the pain away, but because you found something deeper than pain to belong to. You found your breath. You found your present. You found the quiet strength to feel empty without filling the emptiness with old suffering. You found the courage to become more than what happened. Because the hidden attachment to old hurt is not a sign that you are weak. It is a sign that your heart learned to survive by holding what was familiar. But now, Buddhist wisdom is inviting you into something wider. You do not have to keep choosing a known wound over an unknown peace. You do not have to keep calling pain home because stillness feels strange. You can let the old hurt bow and leave. You can let the empty space become holy. And in that space, you may finally meet the self that was waiting underneath the suffering all along. And once you understand that old hurt can feel safer than emotional emptiness, you begin to see why the mind clings not only to what happened, but also to what was never finished. Sometimes the pain is not only in the wound itself. Sometimes the pain is in the sentence that was never completed, the truth that was never spoken, the apology that never arrived, the explanation that never came, and the final conversation your heart kept waiting for. This is where suffering becomes more subtle. The mind does not simply remember the past. It keeps trying to continue a conversation that life already stopped. There is a special kind of ache that comes from words left hanging in the heart. It is not always the loudest pain, but it can become one of the longest. It follows you quietly. It appears when you are trying to rest. It enters your thoughts when you hear a familiar phrase. It rises when you see someone else receive the honesty you were denied. And suddenly you find yourself speaking inside your own mind to someone who is not there, explaining what they refused to understand, defending what they never allowed you to say, asking questions they may never answer. This is how unfinished conversations become mental prisons, not because you are weak, not because you cannot move on, not because you want to suffer, but because the mind was built to seek completion. It wants the open loop to close. It wants the broken sentence to end. It wants the scene to make sense. When someone leaves without clarity, when they shut down instead of speaking, when they twist the story, when they disappear, when they act as if nothing happened, your mind keeps returning because it is still waiting for the missing ending. The heart can survive pain, but confusion makes pain stay longer. If someone hurts you and speaks honestly, the wound may still ache, but at least the mind has something solid to stand on. But when someone hurts you and leaves you with silence, denial, blame, or half-truths, the mind becomes restless. It starts building its own courtroom. It calls the memory back. It gathers old messages. It studies tone, timing, facial expressions, promises, changes, pauses, and contradictions. It tries to become the judge, the witness, the lawyer, and the wounded person all at once. And this is exhausting. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering grows when the mind clings to what cannot be controlled. And few things are harder to control than another person's willingness to speak truthfully. You can prepare the perfect words. You can know exactly what you want to ask. You can carry a heart full of honest pain, but you cannot force someone to meet you with maturity. You cannot force them to explain what they are committed to avoiding. You cannot force them to care about the damage they caused. You cannot make a closed heart become open simply because your wound deserves it. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Sometimes the conversation you needed cannot happen with the person who caused the hurt, not because your pain is not valid, but because they do not have the courage, depth, awareness, or humility to enter that conversation honestly. Some people can wound you deeply and still avoid looking at the blood on their hands. Some people can hear your pain and feel more attacked than responsible. Some people can listen only long enough to defend themselves. Some people are more interested in protecting their image than understanding your heart. And when that happens, the unfinished conversation moves inside you. It no longer happens between two people. It happens between you and your memory. You argue with them in your head. You replay what you should have said. You create the moment where they finally understand. You picture them admitting the truth. You imagine them saying, "I see it now. I was wrong. You did not deserve that." And for a few seconds, that inner scene may feel satisfying. But then reality returns, and the heart feels the absence again. The prison door closes quietly. The mind keeps rehearsing because it believes the right words can still free you. It says, "If I had explained better, maybe they would have cared." It says, "If I had stayed calmer, maybe they would have listened." It says, "If I had shown them how much it hurt, maybe they would have changed." But this is often another form of self-blame hidden inside the desire for closure. You begin to believe the conversation failed because you did not speak perfectly, when the truth may be that the other person was not willing to hear you, no matter how gently you spoke. There is pain in being misunderstood, but there is a deeper pain in thinking you must keep explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. This is where many hearts lose peace. They do not only want to be heard, they want to be heard by the exact person who refused to listen. They want validation from the same place that created confusion. They want tenderness from the same mouth that brought harm. They want the person who locked the door to hand them the key. But sometimes the key is not with them anymore. Sometimes the key is in your willingness to stop knocking. This does not mean the conversation did not matter. It means your freedom cannot depend on someone else's emotional readiness. There is a difference between wanting to speak and needing them to understand before you can live. Wanting to speak is human. Needing their understanding to breathe again becomes bondage. Because then your peace is no longer in your hands. It is tied to their response, their timing, their honesty, their courage, their apology, their maturity. And if they never offer those things, your life remains waiting outside a door that may never open. Buddhist wisdom invites you to notice the craving beneath the unfinished conversation. It may be the craving to be seen, the craving to be proven right, the craving to have your pain confirmed, the craving for justice, the craving for a clean ending. None of these cravings make you bad. They make you human. But if you hold them too tightly, they begin to hold you back. A craving that is not met becomes suffering. A suffering repeated becomes identity. And before you know it, you are not just someone who was hurt. You become someone who is still living inside the conversation that never happened. Unfinished conversations become mental prisons because the mind mistakes replaying for resolving. It thinks, if I keep going over this, I am working through it. But not every return is healing. Sometimes returning to the same conversation is like walking in a circle and calling it a journey. You feel movement because the thoughts are active, but you are not actually going anywhere. You are still in the same room with the same person, asking the same question, waiting for the same answer. There is a moment when the mind must learn the difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection gives you understanding. Rumination gives you exhaustion. Reflection helps you see your pattern, your lesson, your boundary, your truth. Rumination keeps you trapped in what they said, what they meant, what they should have done, what you should have replied, and how it might have ended differently. Reflection brings wisdom. Rumination brings more hunger. And the hunger can become endless because no mental conversation can replace a real one. You can create their apology in your mind, but your nervous system knows it did not happen. You can picture yourself speaking powerfully, but your heart knows the moment has passed. You can imagine them finally breaking down and confessing, but your body knows you are still alone in the room. This is why mental rehearsals rarely satisfy for long. They give the mind a taste of control, but not the nourishment of release. Sometimes what keeps the conversation alive is not love, but injury. The ego wants to return to the scene and win. It wants to say the perfect sentence that leaves them speechless. It wants them to feel the weight of what they did. It wants the final word. And while this desire may feel powerful, it often keeps the wound tied to the person. You may think you are taking your power back by defeating them in your thoughts, but often you are still giving them the center of your inner world. The deepest freedom is not winning the argument in your head. It is no longer needing the argument to continue. It is no longer preparing speeches for someone who is not listening. It is no longer letting their silence become the loudest voice in your life. It is realizing that the conversation you keep having with them inside your mind is stealing the conversation you need to have with yourself. Because beneath every unfinished conversation with another person, there is usually an unfinished conversation with your own heart. You may still need to tell yourself, I did not deserve that. You may still need to admit, I stayed too long hoping they would understand. You may still need to say, I kept shrinking my pain to make them comfortable. You may still need to confess, I wanted their apology more than I wanted my own peace. These are not easy truths, but they are freeing truths. They bring the power back home. When someone refuses to give closure, the mind often turns closure into a fantasy. It creates the perfect ending. It waits for the message. It waits for the call. It waits for the day they realize. It waits for life to humble them enough to return with remorse. But waiting for another person's awakening can become a quiet form of self-abandonment. While you wait for them to understand, who is understanding you? While you wait for them to validate your hurt, who is comforting the part of you still aching? While you wait for them to speak, who is listening to the silence inside you? This is why the path must change. Instead of asking, how do I make them understand? The deeper question becomes, how do I stop needing their understanding to honor my truth? Instead of asking, will they ever admit what they did? You ask, can I admit to myself what happened without needing their agreement? Instead of asking, why did the conversation end like that? You ask, what part of me is still standing there waiting to be rescued? Buddhist wisdom is not asking you to silence your pain. It is asking you to stop placing your pain in the hands of someone who has already shown they may not know how to hold it. There are people who cannot give you the conversation you deserve, not because you are asking too much, but because they are carrying too little awareness. When you finally see this, something inside you may grieve, because you are not only losing the conversation, you are losing the hope that this person could become who you needed them to be. That grief matters. It is not small. Sometimes the unfinished conversation hurts because it reveals the limit of the relationship. It shows you that the person you wanted to reach was not as emotionally available as you believed. It shows you that honesty cannot grow in every place. It shows you that some doors stay closed, not because you did not knock properly, but because the person inside has chosen not to open. Accepting this can feel like a second heartbreak, but it is also the beginning of clarity. There is a quiet prison built from if only. If only I had said this. If only they had answered. If only I had asked one more question. If only I had not cried. If only I had stayed silent. If only I had left sooner. If only they had cared enough to explain. These words can become bars around the mind. They make the past look editable, as if one different sentence could have changed the whole ending. But many endings are not changed by better words. Some endings are shaped by character, timing, fear, avoidance, and emotional capacity. You cannot speak someone into becoming ready. This is not to say words have no power. Words can heal. Words can repair. Words can build bridges. A sincere conversation can soften years of distance. A real apology can release something deep in the heart. But when the other person is not willing, not honest, or not present, words can become a trap. You keep crafting them, polishing them, repeating them, and sending them into an empty space inside your mind. The more perfect the words become, the more painful the silence feels. So what do you do with all the words that never found a safe place to land? You do not swallow them until they poison you. You do not keep throwing them at someone who refuses to receive them. You learn to release them consciously. You write them down, not to send, but to empty the body. You speak them in prayer, not to convince the past, but to clear the heart. You say them to a trusted person who can witness without twisting. You say them to yourself in the mirror if you must. The goal is not to restart the old conversation. The goal is to stop carrying the unsaid words as a burden. There is a practice in simply telling the truth without demanding a response. You can say, "That hurt me." You can say, "I felt abandoned." You can say, "I needed honesty." You can say, "I was waiting for care from someone who kept giving confusion." You can say, "I release the need to make them agree with my pain." These words may not change the person who hurt you, but they can change your relationship with the wound. They can move the truth from a trapped place into the open air. The mental prison begins to weaken when you stop treating closure as something another person must give you. Closure can be a conversation, but it can also be a decision. It can be the decision to stop arguing with silence. It can be the decision to stop explaining yourself to an old version of someone. It can be the decision to stop waiting for emotional maturity from a person who keeps choosing avoidance. It can be the decision to honor your own truth, even if no one claps for it, confirms it, or apologizes for making it necessary. This kind of closure is not dramatic. It may not come with a final message. It may not come with tears, music, or a perfect ending. It may come quietly while you are sitting alone, suddenly tired of letting one unfinished conversation rent space in your mind. It may come when you realize that the words you wanted to say have become less important than the peace you want to protect. It may come when you finally admit, "Even if they never understand, I understand enough to leave this room." The mental room is important. Every unfinished conversation becomes a room in the mind. In that room, the other person is always there. The old version of you is always there. The emotional weather is always the same tension, the same waiting, the same ache, the same need to be heard. Healing begins when you notice that you are entering this room again. You may not be able to stop the door from appearing right away, but you can stop sitting down inside it. You can stand at the entrance and say, "I know this place. I have been here many times. There is nothing new for me here today." That sentence is powerful because it breaks the illusion that the next replay will finally be different. The mind keeps entering because it believes the scene may change, but memories do not change by being replayed. Only your relationship with them changes. The person in the memory will not suddenly answer differently. The silence will not suddenly become tender. The hurtful sentence will not suddenly undo itself. But you can change. You can become the one who no longer walks all the way in. This is the practice of mindful awareness. When the unfinished conversation starts again, you do not have to fight it with anger. You do not have to say, "I must stop thinking." That often makes the thought louder. Instead, you notice it. The mind is trying to finish what was left unfinished. Then breathe. The heart wants to be heard. Then soften. I can hear myself now. This turns the energy inward in a healing way. You stop waiting for them to become the witness. You become the witness. At first, this may feel unsatisfying. The wounded heart may say, "But I wanted them to understand." Of course you did. That was natural. But healing often asks us to accept that what we wanted from them and what they were capable of giving were not the same. This acceptance hurts, but it also ends the bargaining. You stop trying to purchase peace with perfect words. You stop trying to earn empathy from someone who keeps spending it elsewhere. You stop trying to make a locked door responsible for your freedom. Unfinished conversations can also trap you because they freeze you in the emotional age of the wound. A part of you remains stuck in the moment where you were waiting for a reply, an explanation, a sign, or a softening. Even if years pass, that part may still feel like it is standing there, holding its breath. This is why the memory can feel so fresh. It is not only a thought, it is an emotional state that never fully completed. Your body still remembers the waiting. Your throat still remembers the words you held back. Your chest still remembers the pressure of being unheard. To release this, you must bring compassion to the version of you who got stuck there. Do not mock that version. Do not rush them. Do not say, "You should be over this." Instead, speak inwardly with kindness. I know you wanted them to listen. I know you had so much to say. I know it hurt when they did not meet you, but I am here now. You do not have to keep standing in that moment. This is not childish. This is deep inner repair. The parts of us that were not met by others often need to be met by our own awareness. Buddhist compassion is not passive. It is an active tenderness towards suffering. It does not deny the prison. It simply opens the door from the inside. It says, yes, this conversation was unfinished. Yes, that was painful. Yes, you wanted more honesty, but you do not have to keep living where someone else stopped showing up. This is how the heart begins to move. Another reason unfinished conversations become prisons is that they make you believe your truth is incomplete without their response. But your truth does not need their permission to exist. If you were hurt, you were hurt. If something was wrong, it was wrong. If you felt dismissed, confused, betrayed, or unseen, that experience matters even if they deny it. Their refusal to validate your reality does not erase your reality. It only reveals the limit of their willingness to face it. This is especially important when dealing with people who rewrite the story. They may say you are too sensitive. They may say you misunderstood. They may say they never meant it that way. They may turn your pain into an accusation against you. When this happens, the mind becomes even more trapped because it starts fighting for reality itself. It says, no, I know what happened. I know what I felt. I know what they said. And then the mental conversation becomes a battle to defend your own sanity. The way out is not always to convince them. Sometimes the way out is to stop submitting your reality for their approval. You can say, "They may never admit it, but I no longer need their admission to trust what I lived." This is not arrogance. This is self-respect. It is the moment you stop handing your inner clarity to someone who benefits from your confusion. There are times when a real conversation is possible and healthy. If someone is sincere, accountable, calm, and willing to listen, speaking can be healing. But if every attempt leaves you more confused, more blamed, more anxious, or more wounded, then the conversation may not be a bridge. It may be another circle. Wisdom is knowing the difference. Not every open loop deserves another attempt. Not every silence needs to be chased. Not every person who hurt you deserves unlimited access to your emotional energy. Sometimes the most powerful sentence is not the one you say to them. It is the one you say to yourself, "This conversation is complete enough for me to leave." Complete enough does not mean perfect. It means you have enough truth to stop returning. You have enough evidence to stop doubting yourself. You have enough pain to know the pattern. You have enough wisdom to choose peace over another round of explanation. The mind may resist this because it wants a cleaner ending. It wants the last page tied neatly. But life is full of unfinished pages. People move on without apologizing. Messages go unanswered. Questions remain open. Goodbyes happen without ceremony. Truth is avoided. Love becomes unclear. Plans collapse. Promises disappear. If peace required every conversation to end properly, almost no one would be free. So Buddhist wisdom teaches a different freedom, the ability to rest even when life leaves something incomplete. This does not happen by pretending. It happens by allowing the ache of incompletion to be felt without obeying it. You can feel the sadness of what was never said. You can feel the anger of being denied honesty. You can feel the grief of not receiving the conversation you deserved. But you do not have to turn those feelings into a lifelong waiting room. You can let them move through you. You can breathe with them. You can learn from them. And then, slowly, you can choose not to rebuild the prison around them. One day, you may notice that the conversation has become quieter. Not because they finally answered, but because you stopped asking your peace to wait for their answer. You may still remember the words you wanted to say, but they no longer burn your throat. You may still wonder why they avoided truth, but the question no longer owns your night. You may still feel sadness, but it is clean sadness now, not the restless suffering of chasing closure. This is progress. This is the mind learning to stop knocking on the same closed door. And as that happens, the energy that was trapped in the unfinished conversation begins to return to you. The attention you spent rehearsing can become attention for your life. The words you kept preparing can become honesty with yourself. The love you kept hoping they would recognize can become care you offer inward. The strength you used to survive confusion can become wisdom you carry forward. This is how a mental prison becomes a doorway, not because the past changes, but because you stop living as its prisoner. You stop waiting for the person who hurt you to become the person who frees you. You stop believing that the final conversation must happen outside you. You begin to understand that sometimes the most important closure is not when they speak, but when you stop needing them to. So when the old conversation rises again, do not rush to enter it. Pause, breathe, notice the pull. Notice the part of you that wants to explain, defend, ask, accuse, confess, or be understood. Then gently bring that part closer to your own heart. Tell it, "I hear you. I know there was more to say. I know the ending hurt, but we are not going to live inside that silence anymore." And with that, you begin to walk out. Because unfinished conversations become mental prisons only when you believe your freedom is hidden inside another person's response. Buddhist wisdom shows another path. Your freedom begins when you stop waiting for the past to answer you and start listening to the part of yourself that has been asking to come home. And after you see how unfinished conversations can keep the mind trapped, you begin to notice something even deeper. It was never only about the words that were not said. It was never only about the message that never came, the apology that never arrived, or the explanation that was denied. Beneath all of that, there is often one silent wound the mind keeps circling. It keeps returning to the exact moment your self-worth was touched, shaken, questioned, or made to feel small. There are moments that do not simply hurt your feelings. They reach deeper. They touch the place inside you that asks, "Am I enough?" And once that place is wounded, the memory does not behave like an ordinary memory. It does not stay in the past. It follows you. It waits for quietness. It rises when someone's tone changes. It appears when another person pulls away. It wakes up when you feel ignored, compared, rejected, replaced, or forgotten. And suddenly, you are not only reacting to what is happening now, you are feeling the old moment again. This is why your memory keeps returning to the moment your self-worth was wounded. The mind is not just remembering an event, it is returning to the place where your inner value felt threatened. It is trying to understand how someone's action made you feel less lovable, less chosen, less important, less beautiful, less needed, less respected, or less worthy of care. The memory stays active because the wound did not only say, "This hurt." It whispered something more dangerous. It whispered, "Maybe this says something about me." That is the real poison. Not only what they did, but what your mind began to believe about yourself because of what they did. Someone leaves, and the mind says, "Maybe I was not enough." Someone lies, and the mind says, "Maybe I was foolish." Someone chooses another person, and the mind says, "Maybe I am easy to replace." Someone ignores your pain, and the mind says, "Maybe my feelings do not matter." Someone uses your kindness, and the mind says, "Maybe being soft makes me weak." The event ends, but the meaning you gave it begins to live inside you. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering grows from the stories the mind attaches to experience. Pain comes when something hurts us, but suffering deepens when the mind builds an identity around that hurt. A person's behavior may have wounded you, but the mind may have turned it into a conclusion about your worth. That conclusion becomes the real prison, because now you are not only healing from what happened, you are trying to untangle yourself from the belief that what happened defines you. This is why certain memories feel so sharp even after time has passed. It is not because the scene itself is always dramatic. Sometimes the moment was small on the outside. A cold reply, a dismissive look, a sudden distance, a laugh at your vulnerability, a promise broken casually, a silence after you opened your heart, a comparison that made you feel invisible, someone choosing not to defend you, someone making you feel like your presence was too much or not enough. To another person, it may have looked like a passing moment, but inside you, something bent. The mind remembers where identity was injured. It remembers where dignity was bruised. It remembers where innocence ended. It remembers where trust became alert. It remembers where you stopped feeling safe being fully yourself. The memory returns because some part of you is still standing there, waiting for your worth to be restored. Not by the person who wounded it, but by your own awakened understanding. Many people think they are stuck because they miss someone, but often they are stuck because they miss the version of themselves they were before that wound. They miss the self who trusted easily, the self who spoke freely, the self who did not overthink every silence, the self who did not measure their worth through another person's attention, the self who felt open without feeling foolish. When memory returns, it may be grieving that lost self. It may be asking, where did I go? When did I begin doubting myself this much? This is why self-worth wounds are so painful. They do not stay in one area of life. They spread quietly. A wound from one person can begin to affect how you receive love from others. A wound from one rejection can make every future delay feel dangerous. A wound from one betrayal can make honesty difficult to trust. A wound from one humiliation can make visibility feel unsafe. The past event becomes a lens, and through that lens, the world starts looking less kind than it may actually be. If someone made you feel unworthy, your mind may now search for signs that others feel the same. If someone abandoned you, your mind may become sensitive to distance. If someone mocked your feelings, your mind may hide your needs. If someone treated you as replaceable, your mind may become desperate to prove you are special. This is how the wound keeps feeding itself. It looks for evidence, it watches, it compares, it interprets, it prepares for the same pain to happen again. The painful thing is that the mind believes it is protecting you. It says, "I will never let you be caught off guard again." So it keeps returning to the original moment, studying it like a warning sign. It asks, "What did I miss? When did the change begin? What did I do wrong? How did I not see it?" But beneath those questions is a deeper fear. What if I was always easy to hurt because I was never truly worth protecting? That fear is not truth, but it can feel true when the wound is fresh or old and unhealed. Buddhist wisdom asks us to look closely at this false belief. It asks us to separate the pain of an event from the identity the mind created after it. What happened may have been painful. What they did may have been unfair. What you felt may have been real. But the conclusion that you are less worthy because someone failed to see your worth is not reality. It is suffering shaped into a belief. Your worth was not created by their attention, so it cannot be destroyed by their absence. Your value did not begin when they chose you, so it does not end when they changed. Your dignity is not controlled by someone's ability to respect it. A person can fail to honor you without proving that you were not honorable. A person can fail to love you with care without proving that you were hard to love. A person can fail to stay without proving that you were not worth staying for. But the wounded mind does not accept this easily. It wants proof. It wants the person who hurt you to come back and undo the meaning their actions created. It wants them to say, "You were enough. I was the one who failed." It wants them to confess, "Your worth was never the problem." And yes, such words may feel healing. But if your peace depends on them, you remain tied to the one who wounded you. The deeper healing begins when you can say those words to yourself and believe them slowly, even if your heart trembles at first. There is a quiet practice here. When the memory returns, do not only ask, "Why am I thinking of this again?" Ask, "What did this moment make me believe about myself?" This question takes you beneath the surface. Maybe the memory made you believe you were not lovable unless you were useful. Maybe it made you believe your needs were too heavy. Maybe it made you believe you must earn care by being perfect. Maybe it made you believe that being chosen by someone else is the only way to feel chosen by life. Once you see the belief, you can begin to loosen it. A memory becomes powerful when it carries a hidden message. The goal is not to fight the memory, but to question the message. The scene may have happened, but the message may be false. They may have ignored you, but that does not mean you are invisible. They may have left, but that does not mean you are not worth staying for. They may have chosen someone else, but that does not mean you are second best as a human being. They may have misunderstood you, but that does not mean your truth is meaningless. This is where Buddhist mindfulness becomes a gentle sword. It cuts through confusion by teaching you to observe without becoming. You observe the thought, "I was not enough," but you do not become the thought. You observe the feeling of rejection, but you do not call it your identity. You observe the ache in the chest, the tightness in the throat, the heaviness in the body, but you do not say, "This is who I am." You say, "This is suffering passing through awareness." That small shift matters. It moves you from being trapped inside the wound to witnessing the wound with compassion. The mind returns to self-worth wounds because they feel unfinished in a different way. The unfinished conversation wants words. The self-worth wound wants restoration. It wants the inner ground to become steady again. It wants you to feel real again. It wants you to stop looking at yourself through the eyes of the person who hurt you. And this is one of the most important parts of healing. You must stop allowing the wound to become the mirror. Many people carry the gaze of someone who wounded them. They see themselves through that person's coldness, criticism, rejection, neglect, or silence. Even when the person is gone, their gaze remains. It becomes an inner voice. It says, "You are too much. You are not enough. You are easy to leave. You are not worth effort. You should have done more. You should have been different." But this voice is not wisdom. It is the echo of injury. To heal, you must begin changing the mirror. You must stop asking the person who could not value you to define your value. This may sound simple, but it is a deep spiritual task, because sometimes the people who wound our worth are the people we most wanted to be valued by. Their opinion entered deeply because their love, attention, respect, or approval mattered to us. So when they failed us, the wound did not feel ordinary. It felt personal. It felt like a verdict. But another person's inability to love wisely is not a verdict on your being. It is a revelation of their capacity. Some people can only love at the level of their awareness. Some can admire you but not protect you. Some can want you but not value you. Some can enjoy your presence but not honor your heart. Some can receive your kindness but never understand its cost. If you measure your worth by such people, you will keep shrinking yourself to fit inside their limits. Buddhist wisdom asks you to return to what is real beneath praise and blame. In many teachings, praise and criticism are seen as passing winds. One moment, people approve. Another moment, they reject. One person sees your beauty. Another person overlooks it. One person calls you strong. Another calls you difficult. If you build your worth on these changing winds, your heart will never rest. You will rise and fall according to every voice around you. But true worth must be rooted deeper than other people's changing minds. This does not mean you become cold or detached in an empty way. It means you stop handing your inner value to unstable hands. You can still love. You can still care. You can still feel pain when someone hurts you. But you do not let their blindness become your identity. You do not let their failure become your name. You do not let one moment of being unseen convince you that you are unworthy of being seen. The moment your self-worth was wounded may keep returning because it is asking for a new witness. At the time, maybe no one protected you. Maybe no one defended you. Maybe you did not know how to speak. Maybe you froze. Maybe you accepted less than you deserved because you were afraid of losing even the little you had. Maybe you blamed yourself because that felt easier than accepting that someone else was careless with your heart. Now, when the memory returns, it may be giving you a chance to stand with yourself in a way you could not then. You cannot change what happened, but you can change the way you meet the version of you who lived through it. Instead of looking back with shame, look back with tenderness. Instead of saying, "Why did I allow that?" say, "I understand why I did not know what to do." Instead of saying, "I was foolish," say, "I was hoping, trusting, learning, surviving." Instead of saying, "I should have been stronger," say, "I deserved care even when I was not strong." This is how self-worth begins to heal. Not by rewriting the event, but by removing cruelty from the way you remember yourself. Many people continue suffering because they remember themselves through judgment. They do not only remember what others did, they attack the self who was hurt. They say, "I should have known. I should have left. I should not have cared. I should not have believed them." But this turns memory into another injury. The past hurt you once, and now your inner voice keeps hurting you again. Buddhist compassion interrupts this cycle. It teaches you to meet your past self as you would meet a wounded friend, with patience, with softness, with understanding, with truth, but not violence. Self-worth does not return through self-punishment. It returns through self-recognition. You begin to recognize that you were always worthy, even when you were confused. You were worthy when you begged for clarity. You were worthy when you stayed too long. You were worthy when you cried over someone who did not know how to hold your tears. You were worthy when you accepted crumbs because your heart was starving. Your pain may reveal where you forgot your worth, but it does not prove you never had it. There is a difference between losing touch with your worth and losing your worth. You can lose touch with the sky behind clouds, but the sky is still there. You can lose touch with your breath in panic, but the breath is still possible. You can lose touch with your dignity in a painful relationship, but dignity is not destroyed. It waits beneath the confusion. It waits for you to return. Your memory keeps returning to the moment your self-worth was wounded because the mind wants to repair the break. But the repair does not happen by going back into the scene and trying to change their behavior. The repair happens by withdrawing your worth from that moment. It happens when you say, "What happened there was painful, but it is not the place where my value lives." It happens when you stop visiting the wound as if your identity is still trapped inside it. This is why the present moment is so important in Buddhist practice. The past says, "You were not chosen." The present says, "You are breathing now." The past says, "You were rejected." The present says, "You are here now." The past says, "You were made small." The present says, "Awareness is wide enough to hold you." The present does not erase the past, but it gives you a place to stand outside it. And sometimes, standing outside it is the first taste of freedom. When self-worth is wounded, the mind often seeks external correction. You may want new praise, new attention, new love, new success, new beauty, new proof that you matter. None of these things are wrong. Love can help. Kindness can heal. Being respected can restore something tender. But if you only seek worth outside yourself, you may become dependent on the next person's response. You may start using others as medicine for a wound they did not create. And when they are unavailable, your old pain may return even louder. The deeper path is learning to become a safe place for your own worth. This does not mean you never need people. Human beings need connection, but connection should meet your worth, not create it from nothing. Love should remind you of what is true, not become the only reason you believe you matter. When your worth begins to root within, you can receive love without clinging to it as proof. You can handle rejection without turning it into a death sentence for your identity. You can be misunderstood without disappearing inside the misunderstanding. This is a slow practice. It may begin with small moments of self-respect, not answering the message that reopens confusion, not explaining yourself to someone who keeps twisting your words, not chasing the person who made you feel optional, not laughing at a joke that hurts you, not shrinking your needs to keep someone comfortable, not calling yourself dramatic for having feelings. Every act of self-respect sends a message inward. I am worth protecting. Over time, these small acts rebuild the inner ground. The memory may still return, but it lands differently. It no longer finds the same open wound. It finds a heart that has begun to stand up. It finds a person who can say, "Yes, that hurt, but it did not tell the truth about me." This is the moment the memory begins to lose power, not because you forced yourself to forget, but because you stopped believing its false conclusion. There is also grief in this healing. You may grieve the years spent doubting yourself. You may grieve the softness you hid. You may grieve the choices you made while trying to be chosen. You may grieve the fact that someone's inability to value you made you question yourself so deeply. Let that grief come gently. It is not a sign that you are going backward. It is a sign that your heart is seeing clearly. It is mourning what should have been protected. But do not let grief become another identity. Let it wash, not drown. Let it soften, not define. Let it teach you what needs care. The purpose of grief is not to keep you bent forever. It is to help you honor what mattered, so you can rise with more honesty. Buddhist wisdom would remind you that the self you are protecting is not fixed in the way the ego thinks it is. You are not a solid wound. You are not one story. You are not one rejection. You are not one moment of being unseen. You are a changing, breathing process. You are capable of new awareness, new choices, new tenderness, new strength. The memory may try to freeze you at the moment of pain, but life is still moving through you. This matters because self-worth wounds often freeze time. A part of you may still feel like the person who was abandoned, humiliated, dismissed, betrayed, or compared. But you are not only that person now. You have lived beyond that moment. You have learned things. You have survived days you thought would break you. You have carried pain and still continued. There is evidence of worth in that continuation, not because suffering makes you valuable, but because your life remained valuable even while you suffered. Sometimes the mind returns to the wound because it wants to find the exact point where you started believing the lie. That can be useful once. It can help you see where the false belief entered. But after that, healing requires planting a truer belief. Not empty positive words, not forced confidence, a grounded truth. My worth is not reduced by another person's inability to see it. Being hurt does not make me weak. Being left does not make me worthless. Being misunderstood does not make my truth unreal. I can belong to myself even when someone else rejects me. These truths may not feel natural at first. That is okay. A wounded mind often trusts pain more than truth because pain has been repeated more often. So you repeat truth gently, not loudly, not desperately. Gently, like watering dry soil. Every time the memory returns, you bring a little truth to it. Every time shame rises, you answer with compassion. Every time your mind says, "This proves something is wrong with me," you say, "No, this proves something hurt me, and I am learning to heal." This is how the wound becomes a doorway to wisdom. Not because the pain was good, not because you needed to be hurt, but because now, through awareness, you can see where you gave your worth away. You can see where you confused being wanted with being valuable. You can see where you allowed another person's treatment to become your inner truth. And once you see this, you can begin returning what never belonged to them. Your worth belongs with you. It belongs in the quiet center that no praise can fully create and no rejection can fully destroy. It belongs in the part of you that can witness joy and sorrow without becoming either one. It belongs in the breath that keeps arriving without asking whether you deserve it. It belongs in the awareness that can hold your pain with kindness. This is not arrogance. This is spiritual steadiness. The person who wounded your self-worth may never understand the depth of what they touched. They may never know how long their words stayed with you. They may never realize how their silence became an echo in your mind. But you can know. You can know without staying trapped. You can know without making them the keeper of your healing. You can know and still choose to stop carrying their blindness as your burden. So when the memory returns to that moment, pause. Do not follow it blindly. Do not let it pull you back into the old conclusion. Ask gently, what is this memory trying to make me believe about myself? Then answer from wisdom, not fear. It is trying to make me believe I was not enough, but that is not the truth. That was a wound speaking. Breathe. Feel your body. Return to now. Let the memory be seen without letting it become your name. Because your mind keeps returning to the moment your self-worth was wounded, not because that moment holds your final truth, but because your heart is asking to be restored where it once felt reduced. And restoration begins when you stop looking for your value inside the eyes of those who failed to see you clearly. It begins when you stop treating one painful moment as the judge of your whole being. It begins when you finally tell yourself, with calm and patient honesty, "What happened hurt me, but it did not define me. I was worthy before it happened. I was worthy while it happened, and I am worthy as I heal beyond it." And once you begin to see that your memory often returns to the moment your self-worth was wounded, another important question rises quietly. What are you supposed to do with the memory when it appears? Do you push it away? Do you pretend it never happened? Do you force yourself to be fine, or do you keep thinking about it until it finally stops hurting? This is where Buddhist wisdom becomes gentle but very clear. There is a difference between remembering pain and feeding pain. One can bring understanding, the other keeps the wound alive. Some memories come back softly, others come back like a hand pressing on an old bruise. You may be doing something ordinary, and suddenly the past enters the room. A face returns, a sentence returns, a feeling returns, your chest changes, your breath shortens, your mood shifts, and before you even notice it, your mind is no longer here. It has stepped back into that same place where something inside you once felt unsafe, unwanted, unheard, or unworthy. But the memory itself is not always the enemy. This is important. Buddhist wisdom does not teach you to hate your memories. It does not ask you to fight your mind as if your thoughts are monsters. It asks you to see clearly. A memory can appear, and you can meet it with awareness, that is remembering. But when the memory appears and you begin adding stories, arguments, blame, shame, revenge, longing, fear, and identity to it, that is feeding. Remembering is when the wound knocks. Feeding is when you invite it in, give it a chair, serve it food, and let it speak for the whole night. There is a clean kind of remembering. It says, "This happened, it hurt, it taught me something, I must be more awake now." This kind of remembering has space around it. It does not pull your whole life into the past. It may bring sadness, but it does not turn sadness into a prison. It may bring a lesson, but it does not demand that you keep bleeding to prove you learned. It allows the memory to be part of your story without letting it become the master of your mind. Feeding pain feels different. Feeding pain has heat in it. It has repetition. It has hunger. It does not only say, "This happened." It says, "Look again, feel it again, hate them again, doubt yourself again, ask why again, build the case again, prove the wound again." Feeding pain turns one memory into a whole inner world. It adds meaning until the pain becomes larger than the event itself. It keeps pouring attention into the wound, and then wonders why the wound still feels alive. This is one of the deepest lessons in Buddhist practice. What you feed grows. What you keep touching becomes sensitive. What you keep repeating becomes a path in the mind. If you keep walking the same road of resentment, the road becomes easier to enter. If you keep walking the same road of shame, the mind finds it faster each time. If you keep walking the same road of fear, soon even small things begin to lead you there. The mind becomes trained by what it revisits. This does not mean you are to blame for your suffering. Pain may have entered your life without your permission. Someone may have hurt you, disappointed you, betrayed you, rejected you, or abandoned you. That first wound may not have been your choice. But what Buddhist wisdom asks gently is this: after the wound has happened, what are you placing around it every day? Are you placing awareness around it, or are you placing more fire around it? Are you bringing compassion to it, or are you bringing stories that make it burn hotter? Are you learning from it, or are you turning it into the center of your identity? Remembering pain is like looking at a scar and knowing where you were injured. Feeding pain is scratching the scar until it opens again. Remembering says, "I know what this taught me." Feeding says, Let me suffer through it again so I do not forget. Remembering can protect you with wisdom. Feeding keeps you guarded with fear. Remembering helps you recognize the pattern. Feeding makes you expect the pattern everywhere. There is a quiet maturity in being able to remember without becoming bitter. This does not happen quickly. It is not pretending you are above pain. It is not acting holy while your heart is breaking inside. It is the slow training of the mind to say, yes, I remember, but I will not add poison to the memory, because the past may already contain enough pain. It does not need your imagination to make it worse. It does not need your fear to predict it again. It does not need your shame to turn it inward. It does not need your anger to keep it alive forever. Sometimes feeding pain looks like replaying the scene with new endings. You picture what you should have said. You picture them finally feeling guilty. You picture yourself walking away stronger. You picture them losing what they took for granted. For a moment, this may feel satisfying. It gives the mind a taste of power, but afterward your body is still tired. Your heart is still tight. Your peace is still gone. Why? Because the mind may have won an imaginary argument, but the nervous system still lived through the pain again. Sometimes feeding pain looks like constantly explaining the wound to yourself. You keep telling the story inside, not to heal, but to keep proving that you were hurt. You repeat the details, you gather evidence, you strengthen the case. And each time the pain feels valid, but not lighter. This is a sign that the memory is no longer being witnessed. It is being fueled. True witnessing brings softness after truth. Feeding brings more tension after repetition. Sometimes feeding pain looks like making every new experience answer for the old one. One person ignores a message and the old abandonment returns. One person changes tone and the old rejection rises. One small disappointment becomes proof that life is unsafe again. The past begins to sit on top of the present. You are no longer meeting this moment as it is. You are meeting it through the wound. This is how old pain steals new life. Buddhist mindfulness helps you pause before that happens. It teaches you to notice, this is a memory, this is a feeling, this is not the whole truth of this moment. That pause is powerful. It may look small, but it is the doorway to freedom. Without the pause, memory becomes reaction. With the pause, memory becomes something you can hold with awareness. You do not have to obey it immediately. You do not have to believe every story it brings. You do not have to let it decide what this moment means. The difference between remembering and feeding often begins with attention. Attention is like water. If you pour it on wisdom, wisdom grows. If you pour it on resentment, resentment grows. If you pour it on fear, fear grows. If you pour it on compassion, compassion grows. This is why Buddhist practice is so careful with the mind. It understands that attention is not a small thing. It is your life energy. Wherever you place it again and again becomes the shape of your inner world. When a painful memory appears, the first step is not to panic. Panic says, why am I still thinking about this? I should be over it. That reaction adds another layer of suffering. Now you are not only feeling pain, you are judging yourself for feeling pain. Instead, meet the memory with calm recognition. This is pain arising. This is the old wound visiting. This is the mind remembering. These words create space. They remind you that something is happening inside you, but it is not all of you. Then ask yourself gently, what happens if I do not feed this? Not, how do I destroy it? Not, how do I force it away? Just, what happens if I do not add more to it? The memory may still be there. The sadness may still be there. But without your added stories, it may begin to lose some of its weight. A flame needs fuel. Pain needs repeated attention, repeated meaning, repeated identification to stay intense. When you stop feeding it, it may not disappear immediately, but it begins to burn differently. This is where many people misunderstand letting go. They think letting go means the memory never returns, but letting go often means the memory returns, and you no longer serve it a full meal. It returns, and you do not build a whole night around it. It returns, and you do not let it insult your worth. It returns, and you do not turn it into a prophecy about the future. It returns, and you breathe. It returns, and you stay here. It returns, and you let it pass like weather, not truth carved in stone. There is a Buddhist image that can help here. A thought is like a visitor at the door. You cannot always stop visitors from arriving, but you can decide which ones you invite to stay. Painful memory may knock. You can open the door with awareness and say, "I see you." But you do not have to let it walk through every room of your inner house. You do not have to let it sleep in your bed, eat at your table, and speak through your mouth. Seeing is not the same as surrendering. Remembering pain can be wise when it protects your boundaries. If someone showed you who they are, remembering that can keep you from returning to the same harm. If a situation drained you, remembering that can help you choose differently. If a pattern cost you your peace, remembering that can help you honor your growth. This is healthy memory. It carries information, not poison. It says, be awake. It does not say, be afraid of everything. It says, respect what you learned. It does not say, never soften again. Feeding pain, on the other hand, turns lessons into walls. It says, because one person lied, no one can be trusted. Because one person left, love is unsafe. Because one person ignored you, your needs are too much. Because one person made you feel small, you must never be vulnerable again. This is not wisdom. This is fear wearing the clothing of wisdom. It may sound protective, but it keeps your life narrow. Buddhist wisdom does not ask you to become naive. It asks you to become awake without becoming bitter. Awake means you see clearly. Bitter means you keep drinking from the wound. Awake means you know what happened and choose with care. Bitter means you carry the old injury into every new room. Awake protects the heart. Bitter imprisons it. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. You can know someone was harmful without hating them every day. You can know a chapter was painful without rereading it every night. You can know you were mistreated without making mistreatment the center of your personality. You can remember enough to stay wise, but not so much that you stay wounded. This balance is not easy, but it is possible. A useful question is, what is this memory asking for? Sometimes a memory asks for protection. It says, do not repeat that pattern. Sometimes it asks for grief. It says, please admit how much that hurt. Sometimes it asks for compassion. It says, please stop judging the version of you who lived through that. Sometimes it asks for a boundary. It says, please do not let this kind of energy back in. But sometimes the memory is not asking for healing anymore. It is only running on habit. It is an old bell ringing because it has been rung so many times. When you learn to listen carefully, you can tell the difference. A healing memory leads to a wise action. A feeding memory leads to more spinning. A healing memory may hurt, but it leaves you clearer. A feeding memory leaves you more trapped. A healing memory brings you closer to yourself. A feeding memory pulls you into old blame, old fear, old shame, or old longing. This is why awareness matters. It helps you see what the memory is doing to you now. There are people who think that if they stop feeding the pain, they are letting the person who hurt them win. This is a heavy misunderstanding. Your suffering is not justice. Your sleepless nights are not punishment for them. Your repeated pain does not make them more accountable. It only keeps you tied to the injury. The person who hurt you may not even know how much you are still carrying. They may be living their life while your mind continues the sentence they never finished. Feeding pain does not correct the past. It only extends its reach. Real justice inside the heart begins when you stop allowing the hurt to keep taking from you. It already took enough. It took your peace for a season. It took your trust for a while. It may have taken your softness, your confidence, your sleep, your ease, or your joy. Do not keep giving it your present as well. At some point, the most powerful response is not more anger. It is the quiet refusal to let that wound continue deciding who you become. This is why Buddhist practice often returns to the breath. The breath is simple, but it is not weak. It brings you back from the story to the body. It returns you from yesterday to now. It reminds you that even while the mind travels through pain, life is still happening here. Breath does not argue with the memory. It does not prove anything. It simply anchors you. Inhale, and you are no longer fully inside the scene. Exhale, and the body remembers that the moment has passed. You may say, but the pain feels too strong. Yes, sometimes it does. Some memories do not leave just because you notice them. Some wounds have roots. This is why the practice must be gentle and repeated. You do not shame yourself when the memory pulls you in. You simply notice when you wake up inside it. Then you come back. Maybe you come back after 10 minutes, maybe after an hour, maybe after a night of tears. Still, you come back. Every return is training. Every return tells the mind, we do not live there anymore. There is no need to be violent with yourself. The mind that feeds pain is often a mind trying to care for you in an unskillful way. It thinks that constant remembering will prevent future harm. It thinks that staying angry will keep you strong. It thinks that rehearsing the story will preserve the truth. Thank it for trying to protect you, but do not let it drive your whole life. You can say inwardly, I know you are trying to keep me safe, but we are learning another way. That other way is not forgetfulness, it is wise remembrance. Wise remembrance keeps the lesson and releases the poison. It remembers the boundary without carrying hatred. It remembers the truth without needing to suffer daily. It remembers the wound with compassion, not obsession. It says, I will not deny what happened, but I will not feed it with my whole life. This is especially important when the pain involves someone you once loved, trusted, or needed. The mind may feed pain because it is still trying to keep a connection alive. Even resentment can feel like connection. Even anger can feel like a thread between you and them. Even replaying old hurt can feel like a way of not letting the bond disappear completely. But ask yourself gently, is this connection nourishing me, or is it only keeping me tied to suffering? Sometimes the last thread must be released, not because the past meant nothing, but because your peace means something too. Remembering with wisdom allows love and pain to have their proper place. It lets you say, I cared deeply and I was hurt deeply. Both can be true. Feeding pain tries to make one truth destroy the other. It says, if I cared, I must keep hurting. Or, if I heal, it means I never cared. But this is not true. Healing does not erase love. It cleans the wound around it. Healing does not make the past meaningless. It makes the present livable. There is also a difference between feeling pain and feeding pain. Feeling pain is honest. Feeding pain is adding mental stories that keep the feeling trapped. Feeling says, there is sadness in me. Feeding says, this sadness will never end. Feeling says, that memory hurts. Feeding says, my life is ruined because of it. Feeling says, I miss what I hoped it would be. Feeding says, I will never find anything good again. The first is emotion. The second is a prison built from emotion. When sadness rises, let it be sadness. When grief rises, let it be grief. When anger rises, let it be anger. Do not immediately turn it into a whole identity. Do not decorate it with old conclusions. Do not make it your future. A feeling is a visitor. It can move through if you do not chain it to a story. The body knows how to release waves when the mind stops rebuilding the ocean. This is why stillness can be difficult. When you sit quietly, you may notice how much pain has been fed by mental activity. The mind wants to run. It wants to explain, accuse, defend, predict, compare, and remember. Stillness shows you the difference between the raw feeling and the added story. Under the story, there may be simple hurt. Under the hurt, there may be longing. Under the longing, there may be a need for safety, love, respect, or rest. When you touch that deeper need directly, the pain becomes less complicated. You stop feeding the drama and begin caring for the wound. For example, the memory may say, "They abandoned me." Feeding pain turns this into hours of replaying, blaming, and self-doubt. Wise remembering asks, "What needs care in me right now?" Maybe the answer is, "The part of me that feels unsafe when people leave." Now the attention moves from the person who left to the part of you that needs comfort. This is healing. It does not deny the pain. It changes the direction of your energy. Another memory may say, "They disrespected me." Feeding pain may create speeches, revenge fantasies, and bitterness. Wise remembering asks, "What boundary did I learn?" Now the pain becomes instruction. It teaches you where you need firmness. It helps you choose self-respect. Once the lesson is received, you do not need to keep replaying the disrespect. You carry the boundary forward and leave the scene behind. This is how pain becomes wisdom instead of poison. Wisdom is pain that has been understood, purified, and released from identity. Poison is pain that has been repeated, decorated, and used as proof that life cannot be trusted. The same event can become either one, depending on how the mind holds it. There is a phrase that may help. I can remember without feeding. Say it when the old story begins. Say it when the anger wants to grow. Say it when shame asks for your attention. Say it when the mind tries to pull you into the courtroom again. I can remember without feeding. This sentence does not reject the memory. It simply refuses to give it more power than it deserves. Over time, the mind learns. It begins to understand that not every memory needs a full emotional performance. Not every pain needs a new explanation. Not every trigger needs a reaction. Not every old wound needs your whole evening. The memory may still pass through, but it does not stay as long. It does not command the same obedience. It does not carry the same authority. You become less available for inner suffering. This is not because you became numb. It is because you became free enough to feel without drowning. You became strong enough to remember without returning. You became wise enough to honor pain without worshipping it. That is the Buddhist difference. Pain is part of life. Feeding pain is optional, though it may take practice to stop. Memory is part of being human. Turning memory into identity is the suffering we are learning to release. And maybe this is where the heart finally exhales. You do not have to erase your past to be peaceful. You do not have to pretend the wound never happened. You do not have to become someone who never feels sadness when certain memories come. You only have to stop feeding what is asking to fade. You only have to stop adding fresh fire to old ashes. You only have to stop making every return of the memory a reason to live inside it again. So, when pain visits, meet it with awareness. Let it stand in the light. Ask what lesson it carries. Ask what part of you needs care. Take the wisdom. Offer compassion. Then release the extra story. Release the blame that no longer protects you. Release the shame that was never yours to keep. Release the need to keep proving that the wound was real. It was real. You know it was real. Now let your healing be real too. Because remembering pain is not the problem. Remembering can make you wise, careful, honest, and awake. Feeding pain is what keeps the mind trapped, the heart tired, and the past alive in places where life is trying to begin again. Buddhist wisdom does not ask you to forget. It asks you to stop feeding the suffering that grows around memory. And when you learn this difference, something inside you becomes lighter. The past may still exist, but it no longer eats from your hands. And once you understand that remembering pain is not the same as feeding pain, you begin to see the next hidden layer of suffering. Because pain does not only become stronger when you feed it with attention, it also becomes more dangerous when the ego begins to build a self around it. At first, the wound is something that happened to you. Then, slowly, if you are not mindful, it becomes the story you tell about yourself. And before you know it, you are no longer saying, "I was hurt." You are saying, "This is who I am now." There is a quiet way suffering enters the personality. It does not always come loudly. It enters through repeated thoughts, repeated memories, repeated disappointments, and repeated meanings. One day, you are simply in pain. Then, after many days of carrying that pain, the ego begins to shape it into an identity. It says, "I am the one who was betrayed. I am the one who was abandoned. I am the one who always gives too much. I am the one nobody understands. I am the one who never gets chosen. I am the one life keeps hurting." And once suffering becomes an identity, healing begins to feel like losing yourself. This is one of the most subtle traps of the human mind. The ego does not only attach to pride, success, beauty, intelligence, status, or being right. The ego can also attach to pain. It can attach to the wound because the wound gives it a clear shape. It can attach to suffering because suffering gives it a story. It can attach to being wronged because being wronged gives it a place to stand. It can attach to sadness because sadness feels familiar, deep, and meaningful. The ego does not always care whether an identity is joyful or painful. It only cares that it has something solid to call me. Buddhist wisdom teaches that much of our suffering comes from clinging to a fixed idea of self. We take passing experiences and say, "This is me." We take temporary feelings and say, "This is my truth." We take painful moments and build a permanent name from them. But feelings move, thoughts move, memories move, even the body changes. Yet the ego wants to freeze one moment and turn it into a whole identity. It takes one wound and says, "This is the proof of who you are." That is where inner suffering becomes deeper than the original pain. There is a big difference between acknowledging your pain and becoming your pain. Acknowledging says, "This hurt me." Becoming says, "I am damaged beyond peace." Acknowledging says, "I went through betrayal." Becoming says, "I am someone who can never trust again." Acknowledging says, "I was not treated with care." Becoming says, "I am not worth careful love." Acknowledging opens the door to healing. Becoming locks you inside the wound and calls the wound home. The ego turns suffering into identity because identity feels safer than uncertainty. If you can define yourself through pain, you do not have to face the open question of who you are becoming. If you say, "I am just someone who gets hurt," then you do not have to risk hoping again. If you say, "I am broken," then you do not have to step into the frightening work of rebuilding. If you say, "This is just how life treats me," then you do not have to enter the unknown space where life may treat you differently, and you may have to learn how to receive it. This is why some people protect their pain without realizing it. They say they want peace, but when peace begins to arrive, they feel uneasy. They say they want to heal, but when healing asks them to release the old story, they feel exposed. Because the story has been giving them something. It may have given them explanation. It may have given them sympathy. It may have given them a reason to stay guarded. It may have given them a sense of being special in their suffering. It may have given them a way to understand why they are the way they are. Letting go of suffering can feel like losing the map, even if the map only leads in circles. The ego is clever. It can make suffering feel noble. It can say, because I suffered, I am deeper than others. It can say, because I was hurt, I understand life better than people who are happy. It can say, because I have endured so much, my pain makes me different. There may be some truth hidden there. Pain can deepen compassion. Pain can make you wiser. Pain can open your eyes. But the ego takes this truth and twists it. Instead of allowing pain to become wisdom, it turns pain into superiority, bitterness, or a permanent costume. Then the person does not simply learn from suffering. They start needing suffering to feel meaningful. This is where Buddhist awareness becomes essential. It asks, are you using this pain to awaken, or are you using it to define yourself? That question can feel uncomfortable, but it is freeing. Because when suffering becomes identity, you may keep choosing what confirms it. You may enter relationships that repeat the old wound. You may ignore peace because it feels unfamiliar. You may distrust kindness because it does not match your story. You may reject help because part of you has become loyal to being the one who is always alone. Without awareness, the ego quietly arranges life around the wound. If your identity becomes I am always abandoned, you may watch every relationship with fear. You may become sensitive to small changes. You may pull away first, test people, or cling too tightly. Then, when the relationship suffers, the ego says, see, I told you, people always leave. The wound creates behavior. The behavior creates distance, and the distance confirms the wound. This is how suffering becomes self-fulfilling, not because you wanted pain, but because the ego was trying to protect an identity it had mistaken for truth. If your identity becomes, I am never appreciated, you may begin to give too much while secretly collecting resentment. You may help beyond your capacity, hoping someone will finally notice. But because the giving is mixed with the hunger to be seen, you become hurt when others do not respond the way you need. Then the ego says, no one values me. But beneath that cycle may be a deeper truth. You have not yet learned to value yourself enough to stop giving where your spirit is being drained. If your identity becomes, I am the strong one, suffering may hide behind endurance. You may not allow yourself to need comfort. You may carry everyone else's burdens. You may turn your pain into proof that you can survive anything. People may praise you for being strong, and the ego may enjoy that praise. But inside, your heart may be tired of being useful instead of held. In this way, even strength can become a prison when it is built on suffering. This is why Buddhist wisdom does not worship the ego's stories, even when they sound emotional, powerful, or justified. It does not deny your experience. It simply asks you to look deeper. Who are you beneath the story? Who are you when you are not repeating what happened? Who are you when you are not proving your wound? Who are you when you stop introducing yourself to your own mind through the language of pain? At first, that question may feel empty. If you have lived through a painful identity for a long time, silence can feel strange. You may not know who you are without the old wound. You may not know how to speak without referring to what broke you. You may not know how to rest without preparing for the next disappointment. But this not knowing is not failure. It is the beginning of freedom. It is the space where the ego's fixed story begins to loosen and a deeper, quieter self begins to breathe. The ego loves labels because labels feel stable. Victim, survivor, rejected one, unlucky one, misunderstood one, the one who loves too much, the one who never gets love back. Some labels may describe a season, but they are dangerous when they become a home. Even a label that sounds empowering can become limiting if you cling to it too tightly. You may have survived pain, but you are more than a survivor. You may have been wounded, but you are more than wounded. You may have been rejected, but you are more than rejected. Life is wider than the names suffering gives you. Buddhist teaching often points toward non-self, not as a way to erase your humanity, but as a way to free you from narrow identity. It asks you to see that what you call me is often a moving collection of feelings, memories, habits, fears, desires, and stories. When you see this clearly, you stop treating every thought as a command. You stop treating every feeling as a final truth. You stop treating every memory as your name. You begin to understand, this is arising in me, but it is not all of me. That one shift can change your life. Instead of saying, I am broken, you say, a feeling of brokenness is arising. Instead of saying, I am unwanted, you say, the old fear of being unwanted is here. Instead of saying, I am angry, you say, anger is moving through me. This may sound small, but it creates space between awareness and identity, and in that space, freedom grows. The pain can be present without becoming your entire self. The ego turns suffering into personal identity by repeating the same emotional sentence until the mind believes it. It does not happen in one day. It happens through daily inner language. This always happens to me. Nobody stays. I am too much. I am not enough. People only use me. I should not trust anyone. These sentences may feel like protection, but they become programming. The mind hears them and starts searching life for proof. The body hears them and stays tense. The heart hears them and closes before love even arrives. This is why your inner language matters. It is not just talk. It is the way you shape the house you live in inside yourself. If every room is named after pain, where will peace sit? If every mirror reflects the old wound, how will you see your present face clearly? If every future possibility is judged by past suffering, how will life surprise you? You do not have to lie to yourself. You do not have to say everything is fine when it is not. But you must stop speaking as if the wound is your final truth. A wiser sentence may sound like this: I have been hurt, but I am still learning to open wisely. I have been disappointed, but I am not condemned to disappointment. I have carried pain, but pain is not the whole of me. I have lost parts of myself before, but I can return. These sentences do not deny suffering. They loosen its identity. They leave room for movement. They allow healing to enter. One reason the ego clings to suffering is that suffering can attract recognition. When you have not been seen in your joy, you may learn to be seen through your pain. When people only ask about you when you are struggling, pain becomes the place where attention gathers. When your strength is ignored but your wounds are noticed, the ego may begin to hold the wound up like proof. Look, I matter. Look, something happened to me. Look, I deserve care. This is deeply human. Every heart wants to be seen. But if pain becomes the only way you feel visible, healing may feel like disappearing. This is why you must learn to see yourself beyond suffering. You must learn to give attention to your own joy, your own growth, your own quiet efforts, your own small victories. You must learn to recognize yourself when you are peaceful, not only when you are hurting. You must learn to feel real without a crisis. You must learn that your worth does not need tragedy to become visible. The ego also uses suffering to avoid responsibility, and this must be said gently. Pain may explain some of your patterns, but it cannot forever excuse the harm those patterns create. If you were hurt, it makes sense that you became guarded. But if your guardedness now pushes away people who are trying to love you, awareness is needed. If you were betrayed, it makes sense that trust feels hard. But if you punish new people for old wounds, the wound is now leading your life. If you were silenced, it makes sense that you want to defend yourself. But if every disagreement feels like an attack, the old suffering is still wearing your voice. This is not blame. This is liberation. Because the moment you see how suffering has shaped your behavior, you regain choice. Before awareness, you may say, this is just who I am. After awareness, you can say, this is a pattern pain created, and I can work with it. That is a powerful difference. This is who I am closes the door. This is a pattern opens it. Buddhist wisdom is full of this kind of compassion. It does not shame the wounded person. It simply refuses to let the wound become a permanent ruler. It says, yes, this pain happened. Yes, it affected you. Yes, you deserve tenderness. But also, you are not required to keep living from the wound. This is the middle path between denial and identity. You do not pretend pain did not shape you. You also do not let it own the shape of your whole life. There is a moment in healing when you must stop asking only, what did they do to me? And begin asking, what has this pain made me practice every day? Has it made you practice suspicion? Has it made you practice self-blame? Has it made you practice emotional distance? Has it made you practice anger? Has it made you practice waiting for people to prove you are worthy? Whatever you practice becomes stronger. If suffering has become your identity, it is often because the mind has practiced that identity for a long time. The good news is that a new practice is possible. You can practice being present. You can practice telling the truth without becoming the wound. You can practice receiving kindness without searching for danger immediately. You can practice boundaries without hatred. You can practice sadness without making it your name. You can practice self-respect in small choices. You can practice returning to the breath when the ego wants to return to the story. This practice will not always feel natural at first. The ego may resist. It may say, if I stop being the hurt one, then what was all that pain for? But pain does not need to become identity to have meaning. Pain can be honored through wisdom. It can be honored through compassion. It can be honored through choosing differently. It can be honored through becoming more awake. You do not honor suffering by staying loyal to it forever. You honor it by allowing it to teach you and then letting it stop controlling you. The ego may also fear that if you release the identity of suffering, others will not understand what you went through. But your healing does not erase the truth. You can heal and still know what happened. You can be peaceful and still acknowledge the wound. You can move forward and still respect the depth of what you survived. You do not need to remain visibly broken to prove the past was painful. Your scar does not need to stay open for the story to be real. This is important because many people keep suffering alive as evidence. They think, if I become happy, will it mean it did not hurt? No. Happiness after pain does not cancel pain. Peace after suffering does not insult the past. Smiling again does not mean the wound was small. It means life is still moving. It means the heart is not only a place where pain happened, it is also a place where light can return. Buddhist wisdom invites you to stop mistaking impermanent states for permanent identity. Anger is not you. Shame is not you. Fear is not you. Sadness is not you. They are experiences moving through awareness. They may be strong. They may stay longer than you want, but they are still not the whole sky. When a storm covers the sky does not become the storm. In the same way, when suffering covers the mind, your being does not become suffering. This is why meditation can be so healing. In stillness, you start to see thoughts arise and pass. You see sadness arise and pass. You see the ego offer old names and old roles. This is me, this is my pain, this is my story. But if you sit long enough with compassion, you begin to notice there is something aware of the story, something that sees the pain, something that watches the ego build and rebuild the identity. That awareness is not trapped in the story. That awareness is the doorway out. You do not need to destroy the ego. That often becomes another ego project. You only need to see it clearly. When it starts turning suffering into identity, smile gently inside and say, I see what you are doing. You are trying to make pain feel solid, so life feels understandable. But I do not need this story to be safe. This kind of seeing weakens the grip. The ego survives through unconscious belief. Awareness softens it. A practical way to notice this is to listen for the words always and never. I always get hurt. People never choose me. Nothing ever works for me. I can never trust again. These words are often signs that pain has become identity. They take a painful pattern and turn it into a life sentence. When you hear them inside, pause. Do not attack yourself. Just soften the sentence. This has happened before, and it hurt. Trust is difficult for me right now. I am learning to choose differently. I am healing from old disappointment. Softer language gives the heart room to change. Another sign is when peace feels boring and pain feels meaningful. If calmness makes you restless, the ego may have become used to drama as proof of aliveness. If healthy love feels strange, the ego may miss the emotional highs and lows of suffering. If you feel empty when you are not worrying, the identity may have been built around struggle. This does not mean you are broken. It means your system needs time to learn that peace is not emptiness. Peace is not the absence of life. Peace is life without the constant wound at the center. The ego can even turn healing into identity. It can say, I am the spiritual one. I am the awakened one. I am the one who has suffered and now knows more than others. Be careful here. True healing makes you humble, not superior. It makes you kinder, not harder. It makes you clearer, not colder. If your pain has made you look down on others, the ego is still using suffering. If your healing makes you more compassionate toward the confusion of human beings, wisdom is growing. There is a beautiful freedom in becoming less interested in proving who you are. The wounded ego wants to prove it was hurt, prove it is strong, prove it is right, prove it is different, prove it is healed. But the deeper self does not need to perform. It simply lives. It breathes. It learns. It chooses. It returns. It does not need every person to understand its past. It does not need every wound to become a public identity. It does not need suffering to be special. To release suffering as identity, you may have to grieve, because even a painful identity can feel like a companion. It has explained you for years. It has given language to your behavior. It has helped you make sense of your guardedness. So when you let it go, there may be a strange sadness. You may feel like you are leaving behind a version of yourself who protected you. Honor that version. Thank that version. But do not let that version be the final form of your life. You can say, "Thank you for helping me survive. But now I am learning to live." This sentence carries deep power. Survival identities are often born in pain. They helped you endure when you did not know another way. The guarded one helped you avoid more harm. The angry one helped you feel powerful when you felt helpless. The distant one helped you avoid rejection. The self-sacrificing one helped you feel needed. But what helped you survive may not help you become free. There comes a time when the old protector must step aside so the deeper self can lead. This is not rejection of your past. It is evolution. The seed does not hate the shell when it breaks open. The bird does not hate the egg when it leaves. You do not have to hate the identity that pain created. You only have to realize it is too small for the life that is calling you now. Begin with small acts of identity change. When the mind says, "I am someone who always suffers," do one peaceful thing that contradicts it. Sit in the sun, drink water slowly, clean a small corner of your room, speak kindly to yourself. Take one honest breath. When the mind says, "I am not worth care," give yourself care without asking permission. When the mind says, "I am trapped in the past," do something that belongs to the present. These acts may seem simple, but they teach the ego that a new story is forming. You are not trying to invent a fake self. You are uncovering the self that suffering covered. There is a part of you beneath the wound that is not obsessed with the past, a part that can laugh, a part that can love wisely, a part that can be still, a part that can create, a part that can forgive without losing boundaries, a part that can remember without feeding, a part that can say, "Pain visited me, but it is not my name." The ego turns suffering into personal identity because it wants something solid to hold. Buddhist wisdom gently opens the hand. It says, "Do not cling even to the story of your pain, not because the pain does not matter, but because you matter beyond it. Do not cling to the wound so tightly that you cannot receive the life waiting outside it. Do not make a temple out of what was meant to be a teacher. Do not let one chapter demand to be the whole book." So when the old identity rises, when the mind says, "This is who I am because of what happened," pause, breathe, look at the sentence with compassion, then answer, "This is something I experienced. This is something I learned from. This is something that shaped me for a time, but it is not the whole truth of my being." Let that answer settle slowly. Let it be repeated not as a performance, but as practice, because suffering becomes a prison when the ego turns it into a name, a role, a personality, and a home. But the moment you see that process clearly, the prison begins to weaken. You are not required to keep being the person pain told you to become. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to soften. You are allowed to live without introducing yourself through the wound. You are allowed to be more than the story that once explained your suffering. And maybe this is where the next layer of freedom begins, not when the past disappears, not when every memory is gone, but when you stop saying, "This pain is me," and begin saying, "This pain passed through me, taught me, changed me, but it does not own me." That is the quiet doorway Buddhist wisdom opens. Beyond the ego's painful identity, there is awareness. Beyond awareness, there is peace. And beyond peace, there is the self you were before suffering convinced you to become smaller than your own life. And after seeing how the ego can turn suffering into a personal identity, the next layer becomes even clearer. The mind does not only repeat hurt because it wants answers. It does not only repeat hurt because the wound became familiar. It repeats hurt because the heart is still resisting one of life's hardest truths. Everything changes. People change. Feelings change. Seasons change. Promises change. Relationships change. Even the version of you who once believed things would last forever has changed. But when the heart cannot accept impermanence, the mind keeps returning to the moment before the change became real. There is a kind of pain that comes not from what happened, but from the refusal to accept that what happened truly happened. The mind keeps walking back to the old scene because some part of the heart is still standing there, waiting for life to reverse itself, waiting for the person to become who they were before, waiting for the warmth to return, waiting for the message that makes everything normal again, waiting for the apology that restores what was lost, waiting for the past to open its doors and say, "Come back, nothing has changed." But life does not move backward. This is what Buddhist wisdom teaches with such quiet force. Everything that arises also passes. Every meeting contains separation. Every beginning carries change within it. Every beautiful moment is precious because it cannot be held in the same form forever. And this truth can feel unbearable when the heart is attached to how things used to be. So the mind repeats the hurt, not because repetition heals it, but because repetition creates the illusion that the past is still available. When you replay a painful memory, you are often not only remembering the pain, you are trying to return to the world that existed before the pain. You are trying to find the exact point where things changed. You are trying to stop the door from closing. You are trying to catch the person before they left emotionally, before they became distant, before they betrayed your trust, before their words became cold, before the relationship lost its shape. The mind says, "If I can find the moment it shifted, maybe I can undo it." But the heart is not suffering only because the moment shifted. It is suffering because it has not accepted that the shift cannot be undone. Impermanence is easy to accept when it takes away what we do not want. We are grateful when pain passes, when sickness improves, when a hard season ends, when fear softens. But impermanence becomes difficult when it touches what we love, when a bond changes, when affection fades, when someone who once made you feel safe becomes the reason you feel anxious, when a chapter that gave your life meaning begins to close, when a version of someone you trusted disappears while their body is still in front of you. That kind of impermanence feels like betrayal, even when it is part of life. The mind repeats hurt because it is trying to hold what has already changed. It keeps saying, "But they used to care. They used to listen. They used to make time. They used to speak gently. They used to choose me. They used to feel like home." And those words, "used to," can become a quiet blade. They cut because they compare the present to a past that no longer exists in the same way. The heart keeps measuring what is against what was, and every comparison becomes another wound. Buddhist wisdom would not tell you to deny that something beautiful existed. It would not tell you to pretend the old warmth meant nothing. It would not tell you to erase the good just because the ending hurt. But it would ask you to stop clinging to the old form as if clinging can bring it back. Something can be real and still not remain. Something can be meaningful and still change. Someone can have loved you in one season and failed you in another. A chapter can contain both tenderness and pain. The heart suffers deeply when it believes that if something was once beautiful, it must remain beautiful forever. This is where many people become trapped. They are not only attached to the person, they are attached to the version of the person that once existed. They are attached to the feeling that person once gave them. They are attached to the future they quietly built in their mind. They are attached to the self they were when things still felt safe. So when reality changes, the mind keeps returning to the past because the past still holds the image of what the heart wanted to keep. And this image can become more powerful than reality. The person in front of you may be different now. The relationship may have changed. The trust may have cracked. The warmth may no longer be steady. The pattern may be clear. But the mind keeps replaying the earlier version, the softer version, the version that made you hope. It says, "That was the real them." But Buddhist wisdom asks gently, can you see the whole truth, not only the part you want to keep? Because clinging often selects only the beautiful moments and uses them to argue against the painful ones. This does not mean the beautiful moments were false. It means they were impermanent. They arose, they existed, they touched you, and then something changed. This is painful, but it is not unusual. It is the nature of conditioned things. Anything dependent on mood, timing, maturity, desire, attention, circumstance, health, fear, or choice can change. Human relationships are made of many changing conditions. When those conditions shift, the relationship shifts too. The heart may call this unfair, and sometimes it is. But the deeper truth remains. What depends on conditions cannot promise to stay the same forever. The mind repeats hurt when it has not accepted this. It tries to make a changing thing fixed. It tries to preserve a moment that was never meant to be permanent. It tries to turn a season into a lifetime. It tries to hold a person at the exact point where they made you feel loved. But people are not photographs. They move, they reveal, they forget, they grow, they avoid, they change direction. They become more honest or more hidden. They become softer or harder. They become closer or distant. And when the heart cannot accept the movement, the mind turns memory into a cage. Sometimes what you are grieving is not only the loss of someone, you are grieving the loss of certainty. You thought you knew where you stood. You thought you knew what they meant to you. You thought you knew what the bond was. You thought you knew what tomorrow would feel like. Then something happened, and the ground moved. The mind keeps replaying that moment because it wants the ground to become solid again. But impermanence means the ground of life is always moving. Peace does not come from forcing the ground to stop. Peace comes from learning how to stand with awareness even when things shift. This is not easy. The human heart loves continuity. It loves familiar voices, familiar routines, familiar affection, familiar promises. It wants to believe that what feels good today will still feel good tomorrow. And when life breaks that belief, the heart can feel personally attacked. But impermanence is not punishing you. It is not targeting you. It is not saying you are unworthy. It is simply the way life moves. The flower blooms and fades. The day rises and darkens. The body grows and ages. The breath enters and leaves. Every moment teaches this, but we only call it suffering when the change touches something we were holding tightly. The mind repeats hurt because it wants permanence from what was always changing. It wants a person's affection to stay at its highest point. It wants a relationship to remain in its sweetest season. It wants promises to remain untouched by fear, weakness, temptation, distance, confusion, and time. It wants the past to remain available whenever the present feels lonely. But the truth is, no moment can be owned. It can only be experienced. The more tightly you try to own it, the more painful its passing becomes. Buddhist wisdom does not say this to make life feel cold. It says this to make love more awake. When you understand impermanence, you begin to cherish without clinging. You begin to enjoy without demanding that joy never changes. You begin to love without turning the other person into the keeper of your whole peace. You begin to see that every moment is precious, not because it will last forever, but because it is here now. This changes the way you hold life. Your hand becomes open, not because you do not care, but because you care without trying to imprison what is alive. Clinging creates suffering because it argues with movement. It says, stay the same. Life says, I am changing. Clinging says, return to how you were. Life says, that moment has passed. Clinging says, this should not have ended. Life says, endings are part of beginnings. The argument can continue for years inside the mind. Every replay is another argument with impermanence. Every painful return says, I still do not accept that this changed. And every refusal to accept change keeps the wound fresh. Acceptance does not mean you like what happened. This must be understood clearly. Acceptance does not mean you are happy someone left, changed, betrayed you, disappointed you, or failed to keep their word. Acceptance means you stop fighting the fact that reality is now reality. You stop spending your life energy trying to mentally reverse what has already unfolded. You stop saying, this cannot be, when it already is. And from that place, your strength returns, because now your energy is available for healing instead of resistance. There is a quiet dignity in accepting what has changed. It does not look dramatic. It may simply look like no longer checking for signs that the old version is coming back. It may look like no longer rereading messages to prove they once cared. It may look like no longer comparing every present action to their past sweetness. It may look like admitting something changed, and I must stop abandoning myself to chase what was. That admission may hurt, but it is honest, and honesty is the beginning of freedom. The mind often fears acceptance because it thinks acceptance will make the loss final. But the loss is already final in the ways that matter. Your refusal to accept it does not keep it alive. It only keeps you suspended. It keeps you between what was and what is, unable to return and unable to move. This in-between place is exhausting. You are not fully in the past, but you are not fully present either. You keep one hand on the old door and one foot in your current life. No wonder you feel tired. Impermanence asks you to place both feet in the present, even if the present is not what you wanted. It asks you to stop living with your heart turned backward. It asks you to meet life as it is now, not as it was when it made more sense to you. This is where suffering begins to soften, not because the past becomes less meaningful, but because the present becomes real again. When the heart has not accepted impermanence, it often turns memory into a shrine. It preserves every detail, the tone of a voice, the first kindness, the old laughter, the message that once made you feel chosen, the place where things felt pure, the moment before distance entered. There is nothing wrong with remembering beauty, but when memory becomes a shrine, you may begin worshipping what cannot return. You may kneel before a past season and forget that your life is still asking to be lived. Buddhist wisdom would ask you to bow to the past, not live there. Bowing means honoring what it gave you. Living there means refusing to leave. Bowing says, "Thank you for what was real." Living there says, "I cannot be whole unless this returns." Bowing is love with awareness. Living there is attachment with suffering. The difference matters. There are people who cannot release old hurt because releasing it means accepting that the person they loved is no longer who they hoped they were. That is a deep grief. It is one thing to lose someone physically. It is another thing to lose the image of them inside your mind. You may still see their face, but the innocence is gone. You may still hear their name, but the safety is gone. You may still remember the good, but now it is mixed with what you know. This kind of loss is confusing because the person exists, but the version you trusted has vanished. The mind repeats the hurt in an attempt to reconcile the two versions. It asks, how could the same person who made me feel safe also make me feel so wounded? This question can keep the heart trapped for a long time, but impermanence offers a painful but freeing answer. People are not one fixed thing in your mind. They are changing beings with many parts. Someone can carry kindness and still lack courage. Someone can offer warmth and still avoid responsibility. Someone can love in a moment and still fail in a pattern. When you accept this complexity, the mind stops demanding that one version erase the other. You do not have to choose between "they were wonderful" and "they hurt me." Sometimes both are true, and when both are true, grief becomes cleaner. You are no longer trying to force reality into one simple shape. You can say, there was beauty and there was pain, there was care and there was harm, there was a season that mattered, and there was a change I must accept. This is mature seeing. It does not make the heart cold. It makes the heart honest. The mind repeats hurt when honesty feels too painful. It would rather replay the scene than accept the conclusion. It would rather ask questions than grieve. It would rather analyze than mourn. Because grief says, that season has passed. Analysis says, maybe I can still fix it. Grief says, the form has changed. Analysis says, maybe I can find the old form again. Grief brings tears, but it also brings movement. Endless analysis brings mental activity, but often no release. Sometimes you do not need more thinking. You need to grieve the impermanence of what you loved. You need to grieve the friend who changed, the love that faded, the family bond that never became safe, the dream that did not unfold, the version of yourself who believed the promise, the life you thought you were entering. Grief is not weakness. It is the heart's way of accepting change. When grief is allowed, repetition begins to lose its purpose. The problem is that many people do not let themselves grieve because grief feels like surrender. They fear that if they grieve, they are admitting defeat. But grief is not defeat. Grief is honesty moving through the body. It is the heart saying, I loved something that changed. It is the body releasing the fight against reality. If you do not grieve, the mind may keep replaying. It will keep trying to solve what the heart has not been allowed to feel. This is why tears can sometimes bring more peace than thoughts. A thought tries to control the loss. A tear admits it. A thought asks, "Why did this change?" A tear says, "It changed and it hurt." A thought builds theories. A tear softens resistance. Not every tear heals everything, but honest grief can open the locked room where acceptance has been waiting. Buddhist wisdom teaches that everything is arising and passing. This includes the pain itself. But when the heart resists impermanence, it can even cling to suffering as if suffering must remain, because the loss remains. You may think, if the relationship is gone, this pain will always be here. But pain also changes. The sharpness changes, the meaning changes, the body's reaction changes, the memory's power changes. The ache that once filled your whole chest may one day become a quiet tenderness. But it can only move if you stop holding it in the same shape. Clinging freezes pain. Acceptance lets pain move. This is why two people can experience similar losses and heal differently. One keeps repeating, "It should not have changed." The other eventually says, "It changed, and now I must care for my life." The second person does not hurt less at first. They are not stronger in some magical way. They simply stop using their whole mind to fight the movement of life. That allows healing to begin flowing. There is also humility in accepting impermanence. It reminds you that you cannot own people, you cannot own seasons, you cannot own outcomes, you cannot own the way someone feels forever. You can show up, you can love, you can choose wisely, you can speak honestly, you can build trust. But you cannot freeze another person's inner world. This truth may feel frightening, but it can also make you more respectful. You stop trying to control life through fear. You begin to meet life through presence. When the mind repeats hurt, it often wants control. It says, "If I study the past enough, maybe I can prevent change next time." But no amount of replaying can make life perfectly safe. No amount of overthinking can guarantee that people will never change, leave, fail, or disappoint. The goal is not to become so mentally prepared that nothing can hurt you. The goal is to become so rooted in awareness that when life changes, you do not lose yourself completely. This is the difference between attachment and grounded love. Attachment says, "Do not change, because I cannot be okay if you do." Grounded love says, "I cherish you, but I must also stay connected to myself." Attachment says, "Your presence is my safety." Grounded love says, "Your presence is meaningful, but my deepest safety must also be within." Attachment says, "If this ends, I end." Grounded love says, "If this changes, I will grieve, but I will remain." This is not cold. This is freedom. The mind repeats hurt because it has confused change with personal failure. When someone changes toward you, you may think it means you failed to keep them. When a relationship changes, you may think you failed to be enough. When a dream changes, you may think life has rejected you. But impermanence is not always a judgment. Sometimes things change because conditions change. Sometimes people reveal limits. Sometimes paths separate. Sometimes what once fit no longer fits. Sometimes what you wanted was not able to become what you needed. This does not remove the pain, but it removes some of the shame. Not every ending is proof that you were not enough. Not every change is evidence that you did something wrong. Not every loss is a punishment. Sometimes change is simply change. Painful? Yes. Unwanted? Yes. But not always personal in the way the wounded mind believes. When your heart begins to accept impermanence, the memory may still come, but it comes with less argument. You may remember the old sweetness and feel sadness, but you no longer demand that it return. You may remember the hurt and feel tenderness for yourself, but you no longer live inside the question of how it could have been different. You may remember the person and feel a soft ache, but you no longer build your day around their absence. This is not forgetting, this is acceptance. Acceptance creates a new relationship with memory. The memory becomes part of the river, not a stone you keep carrying. It flows through awareness. It may touch you, but it does not stop your life. It may bring feeling, but it does not control your direction. It becomes something you can hold lightly. And holding lightly is one of the greatest gifts of Buddhist wisdom. To hold lightly does not mean to care lightly. It means to care without clinging. It means to love without trying to own. It means to remember without trying to live there. It means to grieve without turning grief into identity. It means to let life pass through you without closing your fist around every moment and hurting yourself when it moves. This is hard because the human heart wants to keep what it loves, but perhaps the deepest form of love is not possession. Perhaps it is presence, to be fully present while something is here, to appreciate without sleeping through it, to speak truth while there is time, to cherish without assuming forever, to release when the form changes, to bless what was real without demanding that it remain. When you live this way, you do not become less loving. You become more awake. You stop wasting the present by trying to secure forever. You stop poisoning today with the fear of tomorrow's change. You stop turning every good thing into something to grasp. You learn to receive life as it comes and release life as it moves. This is not easy, but it is peaceful. The mind may still repeat old hurt when the heart is tired. Old patterns do not disappear in one day. There may be nights when acceptance feels far away. There may be moments when you still want the past back. Do not attack yourself for this. Even the desire for what passed is part of being human. Just notice it. Hold it kindly. Say, this is longing. Say, this is the heart missing what changed. Say, this is attachment asking for the old form. When you name it gently, you no longer drown in it. Then return to the present. Not as punishment, but as refuge. Feel your hands. Feel your breathing. Feel the surface beneath you. Look at what is here now. The present may not be perfect, but it is alive. The past may be beautiful or painful, but it is no longer where your body is. Healing happens where your body is. Peace begins where your breath is. Life continues where your attention returns. This is why the breath is such a powerful teacher of impermanence. Every inhale arises and passes. Every exhale arises and passes. You cannot keep one breath forever. If you try, you suffer. You receive it, and you release it. This is life in its simplest form. Receiving and releasing. Meeting and parting. Beginning and ending. Holding and letting go. The breath teaches what the heart resists. If you watch the breath closely, you learn that release is not failure. The exhale is not a tragedy. It makes room for the next inhale. In the same way, accepting what has passed may create room for what is waiting to enter. The heart may not believe this at first, especially when grief is strong. But life has a way of bringing new air when the old breath is released. You do not have to force yourself to be ready. You only have to stop pretending the past is still present. You can move slowly, you can grieve, you can feel the ache, but you can also begin telling yourself the truth. That moment passed, that version passed, that season passed. I am still here. This truth may hurt, but it also places you back inside your life. The mind repeats hurt when the heart has not accepted impermanence because repetition feels like holding on. But holding on to a memory is not the same as keeping what you lost. It only keeps the pain active. The person is not more present because you suffer. The past is not more alive because you replay it. The old season is not restored because you refuse to release it. You are the one who remains tied. You are the one still standing in the doorway. You are the one being asked gently to step forward. And stepping forward does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop confusing care with clinging. You can carry gratitude for what was beautiful. You can carry wisdom from what was painful. You can carry compassion for the version of you who struggled to accept the change, but you do not have to carry the whole past on your back. You do not have to keep repeating the hurt to prove that the change mattered. It mattered. It changed you. Now, let it also teach you how to release. This is the quiet invitation of Buddhist wisdom. See the changing nature of all things, not to become hopeless, but to become free. When you know things change, you stop sleeping through what is precious. When you know things change, you stop being destroyed by every ending. When you know things change, you stop making pain permanent. When you know things change, you begin to live with softer hands and a steadier heart. So, when the old hurt returns, ask yourself, what change am I still refusing to accept? Maybe you are refusing to accept that someone is not who you hoped. Maybe you are refusing to accept that a chapter is over. Maybe you are refusing to accept that the apology may not come. Maybe you are refusing to accept that the past cannot become the present again. Do not ask this with harshness. Ask with tenderness. The answer may bring grief, but it will also bring truth. And once truth arrives, let it breathe. Do not cover it with another replay. Do not run back into the old scene. Stay with the truth long enough for the heart to soften around it. Say quietly, this changed. I did not want it to change, but I can meet this change without losing myself. That is the beginning of real acceptance. Because the mind repeats hurt when the heart has not accepted impermanence. It repeats because it is still trying to hold what moved, restore what passed, and argue with what life has already changed. But the moment you begin to accept that all things arise and pass, the loop starts to weaken. The memory may remain, but the fight begins to end. The hurt may visit, but it no longer becomes your home. And in that gentle surrender, you discover something the clinging mind could never find. Peace was never in making the past stay. Peace was in learning how to open your hand and still remain whole. And now you understand why the same hurt keeps returning. It is not because you are weak. It is not because you enjoy suffering. It is because the mind keeps searching for peace in the place where pain began. It keeps asking for answers, replaying unfinished conversations, returning to the moment your worth was wounded, feeding old memories, turning suffering into identity, and holding on to what has already changed. But Buddhist wisdom reminds us that peace does not come from forcing the past to explain itself. Peace comes when you stop entering the same painful room and expecting it to become kind. The wound can be seen without becoming your name. The memory can appear without becoming your home. The person who hurt you can exist in your past without continuing to live inside your mind. You do not need to win the old argument. You do not need the perfect apology. You do not need every answer before you begin to breathe again. Healing begins when you stop making your pain prove your worth. It begins when you let the past be a teacher, not a prison. It begins when you can watch the memory rise and say, I see you, but I will not follow you today. And little by little, the loop weakens. The old hurt loses its voice. The heart becomes quiet again, and you finally leave the mental room where suffering kept repeating. If this message touched something deep in you, write in the comments, I am ready to leave the room. Let that be your quiet promise to yourself that you are no longer living inside the hurt that once broke your peace. And if you found value in this lesson, subscribe to the channel for more Buddhist wisdom that helps you release pain, calm your mind, and return to yourself.